so I'm going to start the meeting. All right. It's Monday, March 14th, 2022. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen, and let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Did he say he's going to be late?
Just a couple minutes.
Oh, so we just
I see we have, I'll start with Joan for public audience. Please keep it to 5 minutes, okay?
I try my best.
It's a hard, fast rule.
Joan Code 26 Richmond Drive. Recently, the Spirit Council's name was changed to DEI Council, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. The DEI Council has a housing work group looking into housing in Simsbury with all their inclusions. The Enoch Farms Affordable Housing is 1602 Hop Meadow Street with 50 rental units that is owned by CHFA, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, and under the management of Conover is a community that should be studied by the DEI Council that is in keeping with their mission for diversity and inclusion. Enoch property was developed with $350,000 of state money for infrastructure for the development of affordable units in Simsbury. The town had to raise $5 million for the development of the 50 units. Under the Enoch Trust, the development had to be used, quote, for the poor, end quote. Under the guidelines of the town, had to establish a Simsbury Housing Partnership to oversee the project. The town has a fiduciary responsibility under the ground lease. First Selectman Mary Glassman was chairman and Rob Hagney was vice chairman of the Simsbury Housing Partnership that met once a month. Most of the meetings were chaired by Rob Hagney since First Selectman Mary Glassman did not attend the meetings. All the minutes of the Simsbury Housing Partnership are in the town clerk's office, and some of the background on Enoch Farms affordable housing can be viewed on Google. The Public Charities Division of the Attorney General's Office was monitoring the Enoch development for compliance with the Enoch Trust. Richard Blumenthal was Attorney General, while the law offices of Rowan Case, Kennelly, and Klebanoff were developing the boilerplate declarations for a limited equity cooperative. The law offices of Rowan Case, Kennelly, and Klebanoff, a political dynasty that Richard Blumenthal was not interested in offending. Janet Spaulding Ruddle, Assistant Attorney General, wrote a 12-page report describing the failures of the management of the town and how to comply with the Enoch Trust. Richard Blumenthal's signature was needed to go forward. He never signed the document. Janet Spaulding Riddle resigned as a result of Richard Blumenthal's inaction. The Enoch Farms affordable housing under the present ownership continues to be a fraudulent operation, not serving the low and very low income community. Residents' lawsuits were initiated for failure to comply with the declaration on a regular basis, with one being a RICO lawsuit. Minutes of the Enoch Farms Subcommittee on June 5, 2012 states, quote, Attorney DiCrescenzo advised the town is governed by the language in the ground lease that is clearly in place and is specific. It is very clearly that Section 3.1, low and moderate, was amended. Moderate does not apply today because it's been amended. It is low, very low, end quote. The Hartford Courant article noted that the vote to amend the ground lease to low, very low was 17-9. This vote was not included in the minutes of the meeting. The attendance was Selectman Lisa Heavner, Selectman Sean Askham, CHFA representatives, and town staff. Recently, CHFA advertised Enoch Farms rent start at $1,064, income restriction $77,280. All these low, very low income, and are the rents appropriate? Town Manager Maria Capriola, self-appointed policy wonk, should immediately contact CHFA for a full review of the rental process and require immediate compliance. Chief Bolter has submitted a request for a comfort dog at a cost of $70,000 under the ARPA Act. This reeks of political theater, since a stuffed teddy bear would do more long-term comfort than a comfort dog with long-term costs. The police department has a chaplain on call as needed. Chief Bolter is manipulated by politicos in town, as witnessed when he took a knee during the Black Lives Matter protest in front of Town Hall. All requests of financing will continue after the act sunset should not be approved. These additional costs will spike the future budget and increase taxes in the future. The Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance just say no to all ARPA requests. Recently, there have been a barrage of grievances, several unions or unfair labor practices costing the taxpayers with six-figure attorney costs and time spent by staff at union hearings.
30 seconds.
During past administrations, there were no grievances. Town Manager Marie Capriola has created a toxic work environment that has been costly to taxpayers and created poor morale in Town Hall. All of my comments we post on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co., and Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Under 5, Joan.
I
Thank
did
you. Are you here to speak more?
Yes.
Okay. You have 5 minutes. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Morgan Hilliard, Executive Director for the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for allowing me time to speak today. I know a letter was read on my behalf in my absence on Saturday, so tonight I'll just give a brief overview of the outside agency request the Chamber has submitted. The Chamber has requested an increase in funding from last year to assist with expenses related to increased visitor center management, increased tourism marketing, and increased community events. The visitor center is open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we've seen an increase in local tourism to our office over the past year. We're finding that many people visiting the office are looking for resources and recommendations, and many of the visitors are newly relocated families and local professionals. Every visitor is greeted, and staff spends time thoroughly talking with them and assisting them and directing them to the resources that they're looking for, including local businesses and other attractions in the area, so that they are able to enjoy their time here and hopefully return if they're not already planning on moving here. We also have several tourism resources available that we hand out frequently. One of these resources that has been extremely popular has been the Chamber Community Guide. Traditionally, the guide has been more of a chamber member directory, but seeing how popular it's been at the visitor center, we've decided to expand on this piece. So the guide now has been redesigned, and it includes tourism information about local attractions, outdoor activities, local businesses, of course, and community events that not only the chamber hosts, but that are consistent within the town of Simsbury. Lastly, it's been an initiative of mine to host more community events that attract families to the area and engage Simsbury residents and businesses. The increased community events bring thousands of people to the area and are marketed as in partnership with the town of Simsbury, upon permission with the department that we're working with. The events truly highlight Simsbury as a great place to live, work, and play, and enrich the community while incurring no expense from the town. The Chamber is thrilled to have such a supportive relationship with the town of Simsbury, and we're looking forward to another year working with you. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to the first Selectmen's Report, and I promised the other day that I wouldn't have one, but I have 3 things to say. First of all, just so everybody knows that we have all been entrenched in the budget all last week, tonight, probably Wednesday night. So we just have a lot of homework that we've been doing across the board. I want to mention that we are changing our public audience. It's not really a policy, but if you read on the agendas, we're going to allow people to reach in and come across on Zoom so that they can face-to-face give us their messages, and we don't have to sit here and read them. And we'll get the written ones, and we can read them on our own. And then the other thing that I was just informed about on yesterday, it was Sunday, that the Trinity Church in Terriffill is having a Ukraine vigil Sunday at 3 o'clock. I think the church is trying to put it together. They've invited John Hampton, they've invited me, and I'm inviting the full board and everyone else. And there's going to be some opportunities for donations and things like that. So, pay attention to social media wherever they're going to advertise that. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Wendy. So I will keep the town manager's report very brief this evening as well, since we have a full agenda. Just one quick thing I'd like to share regarding our coronavirus update is we are actually now at yellow status. So that is some excellent news to share. Our case numbers have really decreased. So really happy to be able to share some good news on that front. Just a couple of quick other items for Board of Selectmen business. Just a reminder that if we are unable to complete your budget discussions this evening, we do have a meeting scheduled for March 16th, which is Wednesday night at 6 p.m. If we ultimately don't need that evening, we can certainly cancel that meeting, but just wanted to remind you that we have that as a placeholder. And for the public, I hope folks saw our announcement on Friday. But while we are moving forward with the renovations to the parking lot and the accessibility improvements at the Simsbury Meadow site, we do need to temporarily close that parking lot. So we've provided essentially recommendations for parking access and pedestrian access so people can still enjoy Palmetto Dog Park as well as Rotary Park while that construction is underway. And also just a quick update from police. Some of you may recall back in the spring, the Board of Selectmen authorized the police department to apply for a grant for technology improvements through congressional directed funding. The chief was notified today that Simsbury was awarded the $70,000 that we requested for those technology improvements. So some very good news there. We do not yet know the date in which the funding will be received by us, but we continue to monitor and we will implement that grant award as appropriate when we receive it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Selectmen Reports, and I believe Amber has something to share to start.
Yes. I'd like to say that it was one of our Board of Selectmen goals to work on doing a town-wide cleanup day. This is something that we'd done in the past through before the pandemic, and it has been a long-going project that was started many years ago with former Selectman Linda Schofield and John Hampton worked on it. We will be co-hosting with Representative Hampton and the town of Simsbury a cleanup day for the Saturday after Earth Day. And we will have more details to come on this, but it will be something that people will be able to go out in their neighborhoods. We'll also have some signups for designated areas in town, and we'll be able to get out and do a little bit of cleanup, which will be much needed after people have spent so much time outside on our trails, on our streets, biking, hiking, and so it'll be a good time to get out there and spiff everything up before summer. So hopefully we'll have good weather, but we will be putting out more information about this for people to sign up, and we certainly are hoping that we can get groups to sign up, scouts, youth groups, families, so it should be a fun time.
Great, thanks.
Did you mention what the weekend is?
It's April. It's the Saturday after Earth Day, so it would be Saturday, April 23rd.
Okay.
Because I think Earth Day is the 22nd on Friday, and the Saturday after is April 23rd. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to have to rush through a public gathering permit for that like we have in the past.
No, I don't think we will for this.
Okay.
Maria's on that one too. They're both.
And somebody ordered the dumpsters this time? 'Cause
Yep.
last time nobody ordered the dumpsters.
Amber's got it.
I got it.
She has it. Got the town involved. It's good.
Yep.
Anybody else have
Just
any?
saying, from prior experience, there have been certain details forgotten
Anybody-
by certain individuals.
Anybody have a report here? No reports? No reports.
I've heard.
Okay, let's move on to selectmen action. The first item is tax refund requests. We do this every meeting, so I'm just going to move into read the motion to move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $4,394.25 and to authorize town manager Maria E. Capriola to execute the tax refunds.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. And now we move to the next motion, which is a donation from Keith and Carol McLean Shinneman. They're offering a donation to the food pantry. Do you want to come back? Yeah. Yeah. So Carol and they live in Terriffill, and they've offered to make a donation to our food pantry. And anybody that makes a donation has to come to the board if it's a certain amount of money. So I'm going to read the motion and also thank them at the same time. So move effective March 14th, 2022 to accept a donation from Keith and Carol McLean Shinneman in the amount of $1,850 for the purpose of supporting Simsbury Community and Social Services Department's food pantry program. And thank you.
So moved.
Amber?
Second.
Sean, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're on the recommended appointment of the Director of Planning and Community Development. People have been waiting for this one, so I'm going to turn this over to Maria to give the background and the information on this.
Hey, thank you, Wendy. So as you know, we have completed the recruitment process for our Planning and Community Development Director position. We did engage in a very, again, competitive recruitment process. It included interviews with external planning directors. It included interviews with a number of our internal stakeholders, such as our leadership team, chair of the EDC, executive directors of the Chamber of Commerce and Main Street Partnership, the chairs of several of our land use boards and commissions. So again, I think a really inclusive process. From those finalists, we narrowed it down to a preferred candidate, Mr. George Mcgregor, who is here with us this evening. George was also required to submit some writing samples for us. He went through our standard background check and pre-employment screening process. I would like to highlight his experience. I'm quite excited about him joining the team here in Simsbury. He's currently serving as the town planner for the town of Vernon. He previously served as the planning director for the Sumter City County Planning Department in Sumter, South Carolina. He holds a bachelor's degree from Fairfield University and a master's degree in city and regional planning from Clemson University. He is also AICP certified. He has been in the planning field for over 25 years, and most recently has been in a director capacity for about 15 years. So really just well-qualified candidate. As George moved through the recruitment process, I was particularly impressed with the level of professionalism and integrity that he demonstrated, and his commitment to the planning field and the commitment to the communities that he's worked for. I think he's going to fit in really well with our leadership team. We're all excited to have him on board and hope that you will support that recommendation this evening.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, or anybody want to grill George?
Maria, just for the public's education, is it safe to say that through that process that community stakeholders also interviewed and participated in the canvassing of the candidates, correct?
That's correct.
It wasn't
That's
just a town hall associate or a staff member recruitment process.
Yeah, that's correct, Chris. That's right. We had, again, as I mentioned, both directors of the Main Street Partnership as well as the Chamber. We had the EDC chair. We had our local fire marshal, the chairs of the land use agencies involved. Heather, yes, thank you. Sorry, Heather, very important. Heather participated. Wendy sat in on some of the interviews. So again, we really tried to reach a good, I think, cross-section of folks who participated.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody? Okay, I'm going to read the motion. Move to appoint Mr. George Mcgregor to the Director of Planning and Community Development position effective Monday, April 11th, 2022, with an annual starting salary of $125,000 and employment-related benefits assigned to that position.
Move that.
Okay. Heather, second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. So welcome to the team.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Welcome.
Got a lot of work to do. That's all I hear.
Thank you for the appointment. I look forward to working.
Great. Okay.
Let us know how we can help.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So we're going to keep moving here. Bye.
Well, it was our budget night. He didn't have to stay.
You want to say?
We're not offended when people run from the meeting.
You must be
Especially
smart.
the budget meeting.
Left.
Okay, so the next item is the proposed State Historic Preservation Office Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant Application. That's a long-winded title there. I'm going to let Maria discuss this one, or if someone's on Zoom that wanted to.
I'll take this
Okay.
one. So as you know, we are working on the preservation of the Meadowood Barns at this time, and we are working in partnership with the State Office of Historic Preservation. They brought to our attention the enhancement grant that we could apply for the Meadowood Barns. We can apply for $20,000 that would provide for architectural services related to the restoration of the barns. This person could then also help us develop the specs for the RFP that we'll need to issue later this year for the actual restoration work. So again, this is a really great opportunity, and it does not require a local match. And they, again, brought this to our attention. So I do think we are a very good candidate to receive these funds should we apply.
Okay, did anybody have any questions on that? No? You look like you're.
No, I was just going to say, when I was at the Meadowood ribbon cutting and spoke with folks from the State Historic Preservation Office, they're just so genuinely and deeply excited about this project. And it was really cool to see that enthusiasm from outside of Simsbury. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to read the motion. And move effective March 14, 2022, to approve the application for the State Historic Preservation Office Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant for Meadowood Barns. And if the grant is awarded, to move to accept the State Historic Preservation Office Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant for Meadowood Barns grant. and to authorize Town Manager Maria E. Capriola to execute all documents related to the grant award.
I will move that.
Eric?
I'll second.
Amber, second that. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. I can't even say that. And now we're going to move on to item E, which is the animal control officer. Get through the barn pictures here.
Look at how much that's leaning.
Oh, okay.
Always shows the on point.
Okay, so this is the revisions to the animal control officer job description, which we've already done at personnel, correct?
That's correct.
If I remember correctly. If you'd like to highlight the changes for the public?
Sure, absolutely. So we had two minor housekeeping updates to the animal control officer job description. Following Officer Rudowitz's retirement from service, we wanted to make sure that the job description was current. We found two items that needed to be updated that were purely housekeeping. One was reflecting a change in his compensation that occurred back in 2009. And the second was renaming the title of a regional team that person participates in, as that name had changed. So very minor housekeeping edits. As you mentioned, the personnel sub reviewed these and endorsed those changes.
Okay, so I'm going to move effective March 14th, 2022 to revise the animal control officer job description as presented.
So moved.
Sean?
Second.
Chris, seconded that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. And I'm going to scroll down to creation of the next item. Okay. And this is the creation of the deputy town engineer classification. As you know, that Tom Roy took on the oversight of the department, and they're creating a position for the deputy town engineer. So we went through it at personnel subcommittee, but I'm going to let Maria weigh in here if she would like to.
Sure. So this is the final step in the reorganization of the engineering division reporting to Tom Roy and as becoming part of Public Works. So we retooled the former town engineer position. A lot of the day-to-day responsibilities that position had would remain with the deputy town engineer. Again, though, this person would now be reporting to Tom as the town engineer. And so again, just would be sort of the last step we need to finalize the reorganization. We have proposed a job description for you, as well as a pay range based on a recent market analysis. And then should you move forward with approving this, we will post the opening.
Okay. Anybody have any?
I don't know if Tom wanted to add anything.
Oh, where's Tom? Oh, hey, Tom.
How you doing? Sorry I can't be there in person, but no, I think you covered it all, Maria. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Will this person still work out of town hall, or will they be at DPW?
Yeah, the office is here at town hall.
You have to come back and forth a little bit more, aren't you, Tom?
As it is, I tell you, I do a lot of back and forth between my office and town hall, and it's like I said, we're going to keep this person stationed at town hall, but hopefully they'll make the trip out to Public Works on occasion too. So,
anybody else? Okay, I'm going to read the motion. To move effective March 14, 2022 to position classification of deputy town engineer and the job description as presented. Further move to endorse a salary range for the deputy town engineer position of $95,000 to $120,000.
So moved.
Sean,
I'll second.
Amber, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. And now we go to Naming Rights Committee. Maria, I'm going to let you talk about this one also.
Thank you. So as you know, we are looking into various grant opportunities that would allow us to complete the band shell expansion at the Simsbury Meadows facility. The Performing Arts Center Board of Directors is interested in exploring some donor options with people and what we would call under our policy naming rights for consideration. They did not want to do that sort of in a vacuum without our consultation and discussion. And Eric is the liaison and brought this to my attention, and we thought that probably the best way to have discussions with them around that would be to reactivate the Naming Rights Committee under your policy, and then again for the Naming Rights Committee and the Performing Arts Center Board of Directors to have periodic check-ins about the progress that they're making, as well as any potential suggested names they might want to offer to us.
I think,
Eric also
yeah, the only thing I
volunteered
wanted to add is that I think the intent of the PAC board with this is so that they don't get ahead of us in identifying a donor and then having, coming to some sort of an agreement and then having us turn that down. So it's a successful process that's, as smooth as possible.
I just thought of this. Are they looking for a commercial donor?
It could be an individual or a business.
The Verizon PAC?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's a wide scope of potential donors. Oh, interesting.
So before we form this committee, is this board even willing to consider that possibility when it would come back to us?
You mean because it raises would we pass judgment on who the donor is, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm totally wild about a commercial donor's name being, on a town asset. And I'm not sure that was originally the intent or the scope of the naming rights committee. But, again, I can't, we can talk about it, but I don't want to form something when it's going to just come back here and we're going to say no.
Sean, how do you see it different than what they do with it's a larger scale, but how is it different than what they do at the library today?
You mean what they do at the library today?
Like having naming rights on conference rooms and some of the stuff in the library.
Well, I just threw the commercial. Maybe it's not commercial.
Yeah. Sean, that's an interesting question because if Wendy, you did ingest, but I think they're likely looking. I'm going to put words in their mouth, right?
Yeah.
So they're likely looking to turn to this avenue because they need to make some significant strides in their fundraising because they've been getting speed bumps for the most part as far as our participation or whichever. So I get turning to taking a big bite of the apple, and at the bigger bite of the apple, they might be looking for bigger names, and those names are going to look for returns. So it could be Verizon, it could be
Peterson,
Comcast.
It could be the Peterson.
Our name's already over there, but it's very small, and people can step on it. But I think it actually does open up that question.
It's a different concept, right? We have done, if it was the Peterson Performing Arts Center versus the Verizon. I'm not sure I'm for or against it, but it's a different concept than what I think we had envisioned with the naming policy.
I don't think we're looking to stymie their efforts and the goal.
Yeah,
that's an ancillary consideration.
Well, if they are going to do something like that, this is just the naming. It's not the assignment, right, of the legal.
They can't name anything without our approval.
Right. This would just really be more for exploratory purposes. Our thought was to reactivate the committee and so that the board, has some folks that they can talk to, bounce some ideas off of. Ultimately, if they were to bring forward naming rights under consideration, which is essentially in exchange for some sort of financial donation, it would have to come back to the full board for approval. But again, the thought being maybe a smaller subset of you all working on it to bring something that they think, the full board would be supportive of. And then ultimately, we would work through a donor agreement for that.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. My only consideration is up front, if there are showstoppers for the current board, we ought to articulate that sooner rather than later so that folks don't go down a road. And I'm not putting this on the table, but if somebody said no commercial donors, we need to share that with the PAC as soon as possible.
Right. And I think, John, that's the intent. Like right now, the PAC wants to know what our guardrails are so that they don't do something that we can't walk back.
So the only revision to the suggested timeline is that this committee would confer with the PAC and then report back here soon for tolerance, temperature, whatever it may be, before further efforts happen is your suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think an initial meeting with the PAC to understand what they're thinking about, but I think that this group this is a little bit unprecedented, certainly at this scale.
It's different. I'm willing to look at it differently. It's just, originally it was, all right, we named a street after Jim Gallagher. It's, there, and the naming right came along as when we were looking at the senior center, there was a donation from Ensign Beckford. But again, it wasn't naming in terms of necessarily commercial. It was they wanted to help. It was a bit of a different flair. It wasn't necessarily from an advertising angle.
Because my naivete, I think of signage too.
Yeah.
Like somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to give you $10 million." Then just so to us understand is would that be part of the part of the conversations they're having?
That's part of the guardrails too. Because again, the amount was very appreciative from the senior center, but it was I think, far lower than perhaps a market rate naming right in the past, so I think that's part of the discussion too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think right now we're looking for a volunteer. It sounds like Eric is volunteered as the
I will, yeah.
naming
Liaison?
rights.
I'll do it with him.
Yeah.
But wait.
Yeah, you brought up the speed bump,
Do
so
we
you
want to
gotta
do
get in
rock,
there.
paper, scissors? Anybody else want that?
I mean, you can have it.
No? Okay, it's yours. I don't want, I don't,
No,
no.
I think
Oh,
that's good.
okay. Okay, so let's,
No, you can have it.
no.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, everybody good? So I'm going to move effective March 14th, 2022 to activate the Naming Rights Committee. The committee is tasked with reviewing suggested names for the Performing Arts Center facility expansion and with recommending a name to the Board of Selectmen. Going to further move to appoint the following people to the Naming Rights Committee: Eric Wellman, Board of Selectmen member, and Sean Askham, Board of Selectmen member.
I'll move that.
Okay? Heather, second that. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that carries. Welcome to the Naming Rights Committee. Okay, now we're moving on to, oh, I gotta keep going here. Okay, the American Rescue Plan Policy Resolution. So I'll give a little background on this one, even though it's Maria's. We've been working on this since, I'll let you be over, but you know, there's a couple of things that have come up as far as, you know, how we use the money, when we use the money, what we use the money for, and following along with the recommendations. This resolution, right, has been crafted, just kind of highlighting, you know, the areas where we would use the money for. It really is kind of a big bucket, because it does encompass anything, you know, if it's not limited to that, but it does also explain that, you know, we're going to do our best to use the money during the budget right now so that the money's baked kind of into it and appropriated and it's documented and the public votes on it. And then anything that comes outside of the budget period would be done as a supplemental appropriation, would come to the board and we would have to approve it. So that's basically what this says. So should I read it? And there is one item in here that we need to amend, I found after, is whereas, I'm going to read this part. Whereas the Board of Selectmen finds that SLFRF program funding to support the following programs in the amount listed herein. So we don't have any amounts in there.
Oh, so we could just strike that wording.
Yes, programs is consistent, right?
Yeah.
The following programs are consistent with the, so.
Can you help me again with the legal purpose of this? This has no teeth. This intends, and these are a bunch of whereas clauses. I mean, this has no.
It does, it's just.
Actual teeth to it.
It's really to, like, state the process, really the financial process, in my opinion, and that just kind of shows how we're going to use the money. But I'll let Maria weigh in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So we arrived at this resolution after consultation with our town attorney. Bob thought that, and I agreed with him, that it might have value for, you know, you as a policy board to at least embrace some larger concepts in terms of sort of the major categories of areas you might like to spend ARPA funding on, but also, as Wendy said, to sort of codify a process that you would prefer to use in terms of moving forward. You know, and again, trying to use the budget process sort of as much as we can to the extent possible, but then understanding that not everything's going to really fall into that timeline and that we tackle the rest through supplemental appropriation. So again, he just thought that it was advisable for you all to sort of agree on sort of a high-level policy framework for use of the ARPA dollars. And then Bob assisted us with drafting this policy statement.
So that's a good thing that everyone should really look at closely, are the uses that are in here. And a lot of those were items that we talked about, but it really kind of becomes a comprehensive list that's there. And if anybody has any recommendations or changes to that, I think they should bring them up here, because I think they should bring them up here.
Again, I mean, this is, I'm not objecting to it, but such as but not limited to.
I know.
And then when possible. I mean, this resolution has absolutely no point. It's a press release.
Well, it's not going. Well, it does have the appropriation.
We can do whatever we want. It gives us a clause to get out of it.
It does, but it also says that we will do supplemental appropriations off cycle.
When possible.
No, off cycle.
When possible.
No, that's for the top part.
Section 2.
Okay, well, it's according to Amy and Bob, and that's the path. So maybe it shouldn't say when possible.
I mean, Amber, you're the lawyer, right? I mean, this is.
It says, when possible, the board will consider the appropriations as part of the budget. Other uses of ARPA dollars will be considered as a supplemental appropriation, period. So I don't know if the when possible applies to the other uses. That's the question you're asking.
I mean, or we could do it in next year's budget. I mean, again, I'm not.
Yeah, we can do it in next year's budget.
There's no point to this resolution, that was my question.
Okay.
So why is it, so just clarify again, why is it being brought up in the sense that, is it just because we have to, because we've sort of gotten ahead of ourselves and that we've studied receiving something and now we should actually have a policy in place or a statement in place to actually receive money and distribute it in a formalized way?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
why?
I guess so. I mean, it's not the mission statement, but it's a policy statement. Yeah.
Right, just again, I think, again, Bob thought there would be value in having that high level sort of policy overarching statement for
What
you
is the
all
legal value?
regarding the use of funds, and also then codifying how you all intend to formally,
Interact with the Board of Finance.
appropriate that.
I would say that I think some of this has evolved because of the change in the rule. When the ARPA funds first came out, there was much more strict guidance, and your spends of the funds had to fit into these categories, and there was a lot of onerous reporting around that. Because of the final rule change, and I won't get into the accounting details that we've been over and over with Amy, but we have more flexibility in how we spend this money. But I think what the ARPA work group, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think our intent here is that we still are trying to stay within the framework of what the original intent of the money was for. And even if we have flexibility, a little more flexibility than what we thought we were going to have. These are the buckets. This is the guidance that the government is giving us, saying this is how we want to see these funds used. And so this is the framework to try to help guide our discussions as we go to spend this money. We originally, I think, thought this was going to be much more restrictive framework for spending it. Now I think it's been kind of evolved, and with discussions with Bob, into a guidance and a guiding document more than a hard and fast document.
Can somebody help me why Bob has or the rules have changed, where originally ARPA was only going to be appropriated by the Board of Selectmen, and now suddenly the Board of Finance needs to be involved?
Is Bob on yet? Not yet. Okay. Bob was going to be joining us for our tax appeal item, so I can just text him and let him know that we're ready.
Okay.
I mean, I just.
Do you have a problem though with
I'm surprised that the legal guidance changed when.
There was no. This is what all the other towns are doing.
I don't care what the other towns are doing. I care what the rules are.
The other towns are doing any off-cycle budget uses for the funds. They're doing a supplemental appropriation with their board, and it goes to the next step, which for us is the Board of Finance. That's what they're doing.
So
The money came in to Amy into the special revenue fund for ARPA, right?
So we've created a special revenue fund that's already been dealt with, and there are rules around spending out of a special revenue fund, right? So why is this different than how we appropriate out of special revenue funds today?
This is how Bob recommended we do it. And
So are we appropriating incorrectly out of the rest of the special revenue funds?
I don't know.
I don't believe so.
Can I ask two more questions
So how
then,
do we
Wendy? So
set the rules for the
do we
same
have,
companies?
does the ARPA guidance, is there any ARPA guidance out there that states that we should do something like this?
Yeah. Well, I think there is guidance that says to do that. Okay, but from the states in Connecticut
Okay, so we're not
are
out
doing
of,
it.
so if we don't do it, we're not out of compliance with receiving the money and distributing.
correct,
Okay,
right, that wouldn't
right,
be an
okay. So then that's my first, which one, I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just trying to say, where is this coming from other than our esteemed attorney, who I appreciate, is it just a CYA
There is.
internally? The second question is, if the Board of Finance is involved, do they have the ability to question or say no to what we're doing with ARPA funds?
Yes.
Then
They can, but they have said that they will accept our decisions on ARPA funding as a supplemental appropriation.
Did they pass that as a formal policy?
No, not that I know of. And Bob's here, but we all met as the finance subcommittee, and this was a reasonable document that we put together and felt that it wasn't controversial. So if it is controversial, then we'll let Bob explain it.
It's controversial to me because it's counter to what we were told originally as part of ARPA, and it's controversial in that I don't believe, as Amy is shaking her head yes, that we need supplemental authority from the Board of Finance to appropriate out of a special revenue fund.
It's not current practice.
That's my concern.
Okay. Well,
It's
well,
inconsistent with
let me
current-
add one more thing. For the ARPA funding, any oversight that shows the use of this funding, which we've talked about multiple times, is a value add. The more transparency there is on how we spend this money, even though now we're changing the how we're funding, where we're putting the money, was how we wanted to approach it, so that everybody knew what it was. Every project that we were using it for was transparent to the public. So that's why I would stand for that within the budget, everybody can see what we've spent it on and how we've spent it. Outside of the budget process, it's gonna come to us and they're gonna say, can we spend $100,000 for the housing authority? We're all gonna vote on it. It's gonna go to the Board of Finance. Everybody who's listening to the meeting will see that. Otherwise, no one will see what we're doing with the money. Okay, Bob, I'm gonna stop. I'm not a lawyer, so.
So Bob, the question from Sean, and Sean, please correct me if I'm misspeaking, is that since we normally, for a special revenue fund, have the Board of Selectmen, do a supplemental appropriation, then have the Board of Finance do a supplemental appropriation, sort of why ARPA, why is ARPA different? Would you mind sharing your thoughts on why you thought perhaps a higher level of accountability on the ARPA funds was prudent?
Yeah, I don't think ARPA is different. I think it's the same as any other appropriation. But when I examined the minutes of when the special revenue fund was approved by the Board of Finance back in September, it simply stated that they were setting up a special revenue fund for the receipt of the ARPA funding. There was nothing in the minutes about where the money would be spent. What the whole appropriation side of it was not in the minutes of what they did. And in talking to more than one member of the Board of, well, I guess maybe one Board of Finance member, it was their understanding that they were simply setting up the special revenue fund, and that the appropriations process would follow through the supplemental appropriations scheme from the charter after some determinations were made about how the money would be spent or appropriated. So the question came up, well, why are we doing this different than other special revenue funds? And I don't think you are. I think other special revenue funds are set up where you are designated a grant to be deposited into a special revenue fund, but part of that grant agreement spells out how the money is to be appropriated. Take a school construction grant, for instance, or any other grant. The money will be spent in accordance with the grant agreement. Here, you didn't have, at the time special revenue was established, you didn't have the final rule, and you didn't have the guidelines, so to speak, as how ARPA funds could be appropriated. Now you have that, and you're setting out in the resolution a clear set of projects or programs that you're going to fund with the ARPA funds. And because it's a multi-year process, the special revenue fund is a good vehicle to do that. The question came up, can the Board of Finance veto a program or an appropriation that the Board of Selectmen wants to spend it on? And I don't think the Board of Finance can. I think under the charter, once a supplemental appropriation is approved by the Board of Selectmen and sent to the Board of Finance for approval, their job is to determine whether or not there's funding available for that special appropriation and whether it falls within the limits within the charter. Here, I think you're now at the point where you have consensus from the ARPA committee as to how to proceed with the programs for the actual spending of the ARPA funds.
Okay, so let's, I'm going to read the motion and we can take a vote on it.
So I just have one more question for Bob. So Bob, there are out clauses all over this resolution, meaning it's a guiding document, but it does not hold us to what's in here, right? So we can change our minds on what we choose to spend the funds on?
Yeah, once you can change your mind. You can refine it. You can spend more money in one area and less money in the other area. The other day, they dealt with the Comfort Dog program, and that was very specific. And that was approved, and now the ARPA funding would be dedicated to that purpose. But it's at, like any other appropriation, if there's less money needed for that, you can transfer it to some other program that's been approved. And so you have the same flexibility you always have. The guiding principle in ARPA funds is follow your local procedures and your charter on how you spend funds. And these are questions that are being raised all over the state because everyone's being very cautious and deliberate about the ARPA funds. And there's a bunch of nuances to it that council for towns all over the state are wrestling with. And these are some of those nuances that other towns throughout the state are also dealing with.
Yeah, and again, it's a caveat that other categories are maybe determined and not limited to, because I brought up state public health and safety, but it's basically everything's included in here that was told it doesn't need to be called out.
I have one more. So, Amy, as the chief financial officer of the community, you're comfortable with these guidelines and would sign off on ARPA expenditures as a result of them?
I mean, I would sign off on ARPA expenditures if it's in accordance with the guidance.
Oh, good answer. Look at you. Thank you. But she's not necessarily, this doesn't hold her responsible. That language doesn't hold her responsible.
No, but my point is, at the end of the day, we can pass everything we want. It's her, she has the final word on whether we spend the money.
Well, don't we have the final word? I mean,
No.
it's a policy decision.
No, absolutely not. The chief financial officer of the community has to agree to write the check.
Okay, so let me just say, what is the problem that you're trying to address here?
My problem was that thank you for clarity. I didn't want the language of the documentation to give the authority to the Board of Finance to say yes or no to a project. So that's
okay. Well, he's saying it's not, but the process in here is a process, and that's the process. I'm going to read the motion, and we can vote on. Okay. Do you want me to read the whole resolution, or do we all know the resolution by heart?
Are we required to read the resolution, Bob?
I'm happy to read it.
I mean, you can waive if your practice is to waive it. You waive it. Maybe it's a good idea to read it because.
I'll read it. I'm going to read it. I'm just trying. I'm going to read it.
This matters because of the financials of the town. You can't just pass some resolution without thinking it through. So that's the reason I'm asking the questions, which I think are in the scope of how we expend revenue funds, how we're going to spend over $7 million in taxpayers. So I apologize that I'm frustrating you, but
that's okay.
My intent is to make sure that we're doing right by our charter and the taxpayers and our chief financial officer, which I think is appropriate.
And we were all in the room together when this was drafted and agreed upon.
Well, I was not.
I know,
so
but the
when you say we're all in the room,
I'm saying what's presented here, Amy was in the room, Maria was in the room, Heather, me, Amber on the finance subcommittee, and Bob was in the room, and we invited Lisa to the room, and she listened. And that's who put this together, and we're voting.
Lisa has no authority on this.
I didn't say she did, but this is what we're putting forward. Okay. I'm gonna read the resolution. Simsbury Board of Selectmen Resolution, American Rescue Plan Act Program Funding. Whereas the town of Simsbury is in receipt of funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, whereas the intent of the funding is to assist the town in meeting immediate pandemic needs and to promote long-term recovery from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas on June 15, 2021, the Simsbury Board of Finance established a special revenue fund for the recording of the receipt and expenditure of ARPA funds. And whereas on January 1st, 2022, the United States Department of the Treasury published its final rule for the state and local fiscal recovery funds program regarding the municipal expenditure of ARPA funds. And whereas on January 24th, 2022, the Board of Selectmen held a public hearing to solicit comments and recommendations for the expenditures of SLFRF program funds. And whereas the Board of Selectmen finds the SLFRF program funding to support the following programs in the amount listed herein is consistent with the ARPA final rule and will assist the town in its long-term recovery from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Selectmen intends to use ARPA funding on COVID recovery program services, projects, and purchases such as, but not limited to, public health recovery, business recovery, nonprofit recovery, student educational recovery and literacy efforts, mental health and well-being recovery, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, capital projects that support air quality and HVAC systems in town-owned facilities, capital projects and purchases that support town-owned outdoor infrastructure such as parks, playgrounds, trails, open spaces, and other outdoor amenities, and other categories or items as may be determined by the board at a later date. When possible, the Board of Selectmen will consider the appropriations of ARPA dollars through the annual budget process. Other uses of ARPA dollars will be considered as a supplemental appropriation. I'm going to read the motion. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to adopt the American Rescue Plan Act program funding resolution as presented. Have a motion on that?
I'll make that motion.
Amber?
Second.
Chris, second that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, that passes. Okay, so the next, are we gonna?
You know, I was just thinking, since Bob is here with us now, would folks be amenable to, we have one other item on the agenda that includes Bob. Perhaps we could tackle that and then come back to budget?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Rather than having Bob come back in a few hours.
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So it would first just be an executive session with Town Attorney Dave Crescenzo.
laptop for the next item.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
We're messing up Bob's night.
And myself and Deputy Town Manager Melissa Appleby and our assessor Francine Beland.
So this is we're gonna make the motion to move to executive session.
And then we can come out but yes.
Okay, so it's a little off kilter. Okay, so can I get a motion for us to move to executive session?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. So Heather, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes. We're going to agenda item J, and this is the proposed settlement agreement pending tax appeal for Simsbury Property Group LLC, and I'm going to turn this over to the professionals to explain this.
Great, thank you. So our town attorney and town assessor had reached a tentative agreement on a tax appeal case for 88 Hot Meadow Street that would settle on an assessed value of a market value of $465,000. We do have the stipulated agreement that has been presented to the Board of Selectmen. We would be seeking you to approve that joint stipulation for judgment agreement as presented this evening, and then we would make sure to put all of the materials online following this evening's meeting. And there's a motion prepared for you.
Okay, so anybody have any questions other than what we just, okay, so I'm gonna move effective March 14, 2022 to approve the joint stipulation for judgment for docket number HHB CV 2160668858-S, Simsbury Property Group LLC versus the Town of Simsbury for the tax appeal on the property located at 88 Hot Meadow Street as presented, and authorize Town Attorney Robert D. Crescenzo to execute the agreement.
So moved.
Eric? Sean, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that motion passes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francine.
Thank you.
Thanks, Francine.
Oh, okay, we have a few other things to look at before we can get to, can we, so we have the budget discussion, and then we also have the appointments and resignations. Pardon me?
Yeah, just budget and appointments are left.
So we're going to save the appointments till after the budget? Okay. Okay. Or just jumping right in right now. So the next item on the agenda is to continue our budget discussions and potential adoption of some of the budget items.
Yes, so thank you, Wendy. So we have a few policy, conversations for you all to really get to where you're achieving consensus on the budget you want to advance to the Board of Finance. The three, as I see it, sort of larger outstanding items from Saturday that we still have are the outside agency funding requests that you received. We did receive requests from a few agencies for an increase, as well as one new request. We also have the service improvement list. Typically, you'll sort of go through that item by item them and flag if you have any concerns or are supportive of those. And then the third item would be to using our ARPA spreadsheet that Amber put together. Thank you very much for that, Amber. We will sort of use that to guide those ARPA decisions that you want to incorporate into the budget. So I believe those are really, again, sort of the last three policy consideration items we have. In the interest of time, I thought the outside agency request is the smallest in scope of the three outstanding items. So if we could maybe pull up that slide, Melissa, and just sort of work through those. Great, thank you.
Okay.
So a few of these outside agency requests, you may recall, they're based on a per capita formula. So those ones we typically just automatically approve. We did receive requests for increases from SCTV, also from the Chamber of Commerce, as well as Interval House, and a new request from Gifts of Love. And then under the Economic Development Program, we also received an increased request from Main Street Partnership. So again, really just for those items that are requesting increases. I don't know how folks would prefer, if you want to take it organization by organization, or if you just have general comments or feedback about those requested increases.
Yeah, I'm going to open up for questions. I'm just going to remind everybody that I think last year we pretty much level funded. We didn't do any increases, nor did we take on anybody new, correct?
We didn't take on anybody new. There was a small $2,000 increase that was funded via the trust.
Okay.
For Meals on Wheels.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay, so does anybody have any general questions? Trying to look at it.
How is this list different from the supplemental piece that I've been working on?
Nicer colors.
That one that you're holding has an additional column that includes basically what's in Maria's proposed budget. So what's on the screen is the actual request as compared to the fiscal year 22 budget.
Right, that's correct. So that far right column, Chris, in your spreadsheet shows the increased amount that the agencies were requesting.
And it's just ordered differently.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so we know that there's the ones that we are going to automatically approve are we can just
The
call
per
those
cap
out,
ones,
right?
yeah.
So VNA, okay, those VNA Amplify, Meals on Wheels, right? North Central EMS Council, River Watershed, Greater Hartford Transit District, right? So we're really going to look at SCTV. So we want to just jump in there. I mean, what do people have any general comments? How do you want to kick it off?
I can share some thoughts around the SCTV request.
Okay.
I was intrigued by some of their thoughts around equipment upgrades, especially around making meetings online easier to find in their archives. There weren't specific dollars associated with any of those things, and I thought that one potential would be if we flat funded them this year, but they could come through the ARPA grant request process with some specific asks for equipment, which I also thought would be appropriate because of the heightened role that they took on during the pandemic.
Yeah, I'm not sure that their request for the increase in the $15,000, and maybe I missed it, but I don't think it really detailed out like how much for the equipment versus, maybe some. I think I assume most of the $15,000 is equipment and renovation of the studio, but I think if it comes through the ARPA request, we could get a little more detail on that and ask some questions. And I think, we've all relied so much on everything SCTV has done to make our meetings available to the public, and they have provided a great service. And I'd just like to know more about what those equipment service improvements would be and how it will continue to allow us to bring hybrid meetings with improved sound or whatever the equipment will allow them to do. I'm not quite sure if it's improvements or if it's just that they need it because of broadcasting more programs. I'd like some more detail on that.
And so I was, when I read I'm just going to give my feeling on the outside agency. When I first read it, I was initially inclined because of the ARPA funding and because we were proposing a 501c3 program where we were going to let people apply for money, that we might want to have a venue for some of the current agencies to get access to that money. Whether we make them apply, which I think is what you guys are saying, but if we implement that program, we still haven't implemented it yet, they would have to apply for the funds. The only reason I was considering some form of increase was because of the cord cutting that we've been hearing about, that people moving to, the funds that SCTV gets is only from Comcast, whereas many people are moving away from a cable service and they're going to streaming, and streaming does not pay or contribute to the SCTV funds, which is why I believe partially why they're asking for more funds. I don't know if it's $15,000 worth. I don't know the amount, but I thought that would be something reasonable to accommodate in that loss of money. But I don't have a figure on that, so I can't really say what that is.
So when I look at this list and I think about the way that we talk about it, just as we always think about level funding, because these are ongoing services that are. So is this a one-time investment? Because I want to be super clear on that, because the SCTV has been very vocal, and not doubting their needs, been very vocal about having this board support them at a healthier number. So how is this different? Is the number that they were asking for in the past, the support they were asking for in the past, would that be going towards what they're saying they need now? Or were they always asking for money that was just to increase their budget in general? So I want to be clear, is this $15K coming out next year and we're going back to level funding? That also helps.
Yeah, I think that matters if it's how much of the 15K is for equipment and studio renovation versus how much is what Wendy's talking about, where they're losing perhaps some fee funding. If that's the case, then that would be an ongoing reset in their funding.
My recollection is that we were funding them at about $5,000 a year. This was either 2 or 4 years ago, and it was the intent of the board at the time to give them a short-term increase, but not that it would stay at that level. So what we're talking about again would be another increase above that. And I think we're talking about two things. I mean, one is a challenged business model, and the other is investment in equipment that was perhaps speeded up by the pandemic. And that's why I was advocating that we think about it through ARPA, so it truly would be a one-time opportunity for them.
My only pushback on the equipment is if it's going to be used for government production or government TV, then I agree with it. If it's going to be used for the additional program, then I'm not sure I agree with that, right?
Yeah,
there's a lot of good stuff and content, but our job is to make sure that we have transparent access for the taxpayers and the voters on the government inner workings. And as I look at the ask, it's modular studio, it's the facility at Enoch, which I don't disagree needs help, but again, is that the role of the taxpayers to fund the additional nice to have programming that SCTV offers?
Yeah.
Well, I would go back to the value of SCTV over the last 2 years to some people and to us
on the government access side, absolutely.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think we're talking about investing in those. I think we're talking about investing at least
in their studio,
which again doesn't provide meeting access.
Well, so part of the $25,000 is the $15,000 addition is for that. We don't really know what in there is really for what I just mentioned. I don't know how much that is.
It's for the government programming. Yeah. That would be important to me, and I think we absolutely should continue to support that piece of it.
So if I hear your question.
Go through Eric's suggestion, and then we have something that's a little more itemized so that we have a better idea of what we're looking at.
So let's talk about that kind of as our policy, right? Are we going to kind of say for all of these, if they're asking, we want to keep the level the same again, and if there's an additional ask that they should go through the 501c3 program and apply through that program, or do we set aside any additional ARPA funding for these one-time asks for these recurring, outside agencies that we have a relationship with already. Any thoughts on that? I was looking at it.
Well, the way that I've been trying to watch your ARPA conversations and make sure that, and understand the spirit of, I would see that a number of these could go forward through that process, because a number of them are within, I think, in the consideration of what ARPA is moving towards. When we talk about that list that you read off in the motion, enough Morgan's here. So the Chamber of Commerce, sort of to me, sort of falls out of some of the spirit of some of these other ones. So it in the sense that as it relates to that motion that you lived, although it did talk about business, support of businesses, but I think it allows us to move some of these into the broader ARPA conversations. But I think they fall directly into the spirit of much of ARPA. Mm-hmm. Health, wellness, community service, which touches every health and wellness and community service touches every member of the community, versus a little more of the more specialization of some of the stuff on here. So that's what I would.
Yeah, I guess the only thing we don't know is a couple of them did make the case that their value was enhanced, or they needed more because of ARPA, and others did not. Mm-hmm. But so.
Right, that the pandemic strained their delivery of services, and so they needed further investment to continue to the level of maybe adjusted service now. Mm-hmm. So I would just, to clarify again, I would like to see I could see the conversation that a number of these could move into that lane of support and validation versus with us here. Mm-hmm. I would support that.
I support that as well, just because then next year, we're not then looking at the approval as this year's level. It just seems like then you just keep getting into this moving
right, I've already
higher.
Yeah, I've adjusted to it now. Mm-hmm. I need that,
Right.
And I think, like, for Gifts of Love, I know that's a new request this year. I would imagine that their request is probably based on the food support they provide to families in town through their backpack programs. I mean, they provide direct food support, and I don't know that we have supported them in the past, but that probably, again, is like a result of pandemic strain. So would we encourage them to apply through ARPA, even though they weren't on this list from last year? I think they could still apply.
Be a very strong candidate.
Yeah.
So that's making a case for the 501c3 program, right? I mean, so that we really need to move forward on that.
Yeah.
We've talked about it quite a bit.
And in the case of Gifts of Love, I'd probably encourage them to come back with even a larger number through the ARPA program.
Right.
Okay. And
then, considering their asks from a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But we still have the proof, just to let all these groups know, there is that proof required currently in the application that Amy put together with Melissa, of the data that's going to be needed to get there. So they could take probably some of what's here and then supplement that, I guess is what we're going to say. Because the application asks for some financial information, I think.
Okay.
So to pull this car back on the rails that I drove off.
You didn't drive it.
Are we saying no to everyone in a sense that we're no
like.
through our process, but encouraging them to work through another process being established that might result in a different answer?
Yeah.
Not a guarantee, but.
It does seem, the consensus I think I'm hearing from you all. So again, the new request was Gifts of Love, and then the requested increases just being from Main Street, Chamber, SCTV, and Interval House, that we could simply inform them that, your recommendation is to proceed with level funding, but that we will be moving forward with the 501c3 application process through our ARPA program, and that they may ask for those additional dollars through that process. Or again, if they seek even, additional support, that they could do that through that process. Is that where folks are landing? It sounds like that's the consensus.
Are you gonna, go ahead.
I'm not sure all those organizations are 501c3s.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Oh, right, there's C6, that's correct. Thank you, thank you.
With, are the others, Melissa?
Oh, I'm not sure what Main Street and I assume Interval House would be.
Oh, it says on the sheets, actually.
Yeah,
We know
I'm sure
Interval is-
Gifts of Love is a
North Central-
501c3.
The North Central EMS Council, I'm not quite sure with that.
I don't think they would be
Well,
going
can
through.
we could always modify the 501c3,
Oh, you haven't
right?
approved it yet.
We haven't approved it
Right.
yet, and we can make it a little bit, maybe
We can have a stipulation for the chamber. I mean, our intent.
adjust it so that some of these people who have reasonable
Yeah.
asks that may not have met the original application can modify that. And that would make it more digestible for me, at least, that they can come and get some of that pie, right?
Yeah. I think our intent would have been to include organizations like chambers. We were trying to exclude the other 501 labor unions, trusts, all the other things that really isn't what we were intended to do.
Yeah. Well, I think we have the flexibility in our
We
resolution
certainly
to
We do.
craft this in a way that makes sense.
Okay, so sounds to me like we are,
Just to be clear, we're level funding the ones that we're not basically contractually obligated to go up on per capita basis.
yeah, that's what I'm hearing, the chamber.
Except for, so yeah.
And then this way, again, it maintains that same level when we come in next year. We'll be where we are now. The funds will be
Correct,
through
it's
ARPA.
not ours. It's,
Yeah, and we're back to square one again. Okay.
Okay,
that
great.
Okay.
All right, you guys just
Okay.
tackled a big policy conversation tonight. Good job. All right, so the next item that we typically go through are the service improvement priorities that I had flagged for your consideration. And these are, again, all the ones that we've presented either through my presentation or through the departmental budget presentations the last few days. So again, typically we do go, sort of through this line by line just to see your comfort level of support. So if we could perhaps start off with the IT needs, which was the IT specialist position, as well as the network engineering support. Any additional questions you might have for us as staff about those requests? And if not, folks generally feeling supportive of moving forward with that or not. And just, sorry, for our new members, Amy always keeps a really handy list for us. As you're adding and subtracting things from the budget, she and Melissa are over there keeping track of that. And when we start to get towards the end, we'll pull up the mill rate calculation sheet just so you can see how everything is. But again, just as we're working towards that consensus, we'll work through this list.
I'll go first if you don't mind. I would support the IT specialists even if we had budgetary pressures. I think that's been a department that we haven't addressed as long as I've been on the board. I think in the age of cybersecurity challenges and all the, the tie-ins with public safety, the tie-ins with all of our departments, I mean, what we just went through in the pandemic, I think it's an easy case for me to support that one.
I'm supportive of the IT specialist, and I hope that we can mold some of the job description to include website maintenance in there, because that would help Melissa and anybody else that has to get on there and do that.
and I'm, sorry. Are we moving off of that one?
No, we're just, do we all?
Is it a free-for-all, whichever ones we like?
Well, I think, do we all,
We're just working through the list. So
do we
the
all
IT
agree that we want to go with the IT specialist?
Yeah.
There's consensus.
Consensus?
Okay.
Great.
Consensus.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. So moving on to the CLIA specialist. This was again the civilian position to replace work currently being performed by a sworn officer for the police department.
I'm in full support of this.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a no-brainer.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the next item, I had recommended funding an additional sworn officer if funds permitted.
So I raised this the other day. I would like to explore funding 2 new officers to see the impact to the mill rate. And if possible, there might be the need to maybe make a couple of offsets or cuts in a couple places that we could talk about to make that a little better. But we know we're not going to raise the mill rate this year, and that's the contingency here. We have to stay flat. But if that's just something that given the request for 6 officers, the upcoming retirements, if we find that with this study that we need 6, then we've hedged our bets a little. If we find out with the study that we need 1, then maybe when the retirements come around or we get the study back, I don't know if we cut people, freeze people, I heard you say, not fill positions.
Just don't
I think
fill.
realistically, we don't tread our way to.
You've got retirements.
Yeah.
We have
rolling
5 retirements coming.
All we're doing here, and I love your suggestion, and I appreciate you bringing up, I agree with you, because I think we're essentially giving you the go to, if we agree to this and the taxpayers do, to have you pre-hire at least 2 of those retirements, right? Which I think helps put you in a better position.
At least
And
timing.
then as we go through the study, as we go through the next year or two, again, if we need, again, I hope that, we're funding the police department the right way. If we are short, I think we're going to be thankful we did an extra officer now in a year where we have some flexibility. And again, if things change, if budgetary pressures change, again, we know there is turnover coming, which doesn't impact an actual person, it's a position. So I don't think as you said, we've bound ourselves to a forever if circumstances change. But I think it sets us up on a prudent financial path just to still have some flexibility in the future.
So just we're going to look at Amy. Does it seem like this would keep us under the line, depending on other things?
We can keep it with a flat mill rate. You just lose that, like the 800,000, 400,000 that we were talking about on Saturday.
It just comes down to it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know there's.
So does that means that the increase that we're facing is just.
The following year.
Is just, it's not that I'm gonna say, I don't wanna minimize it, but it's somewhat larger. It's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but so is it possible to tell me what that does to that increase? Does it take it from, it was 1,200 to 1,200, the deltas were 1,200 and 1,600, I believe, something?
Yeah, we can definitely show you when we pull up.
that would
When we
just-
look at the numbers, okay.
And I think it's to us, because we always think about big numbers, it's incidental, but I'd just like to see how much it moves.
Yeah, and what we can also do too, when we pull up the mill rate calculation sheet for you, sometimes, right, we'll add things in and take them back out. So I think we had prepared it with the service improvements. We could add in a second officer just so you can, again, see sort of visually what that looks like.
But I mean, it's essentially 4%, 5% of 140,000 in the worst case, right? From what it costs the taxpayers next year.
I think that's fair without putting it in.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll flag for that sort of calculation spreadsheet the consideration of a second officer.
Okay.
Okay. And then the construction inspection services, this was something that I had spoken of during my presentation. Again, just that we have the flexibility now with a really good staff hire over in sewer that we can essentially contract with the enterprise fund to perform those general fund services for us. But because it's an enterprise fund, we would need to repay them for work performed. And again, this would be for things like inspecting cuts into our roadways by utility companies, et cetera, to make sure that the integrity of our infrastructure is maintained. Tom Roy is on Zoom, so if you do have additional questions about that, he'd be well positioned to answer those for you.
No problem.
No questions from me.
Makes sense.
Okay, great, wonderful. And then the next item we had for your consideration was the Pollinator Initiative, some supplies to get going with some of the plantings in our various town-owned facilities.
Can I provide a little bit of context on what this money would do? One of the things that we've learned when you have a pollinator organization that partners with the municipality has an opportunity to do a set of visible projects that serve to educate the public on opportunities to manage perhaps their front lawns differently than they do today. So what this would be the town doing a showcase or showcase gardens in a visible spot. And the pollinator folks would likely fund some signage around it to educate the public on, why we're using these particular plants and, how we're caring for them and things like that. This would be a precursor to a much larger project, which I believe is scheduled to be funded next year, which would be the Iron Horse median. So this would get us started on a visible garden to get the community engaged in this topic.
My only question on that one was, is that something that we could use, because it's in the Parks and Rec budget, correct?
Right.
If there was room with savings in that department at all, year-end savings or from any other area that had overage that we didn't need to fund the pollinator separately. I mean, I don't know if it's a timing issue that they need to start it, you know, right when have the money available to do it when the budget starts.
You don't plant in July, right? So
I don't know when you plant.
it's probably the worst time, in the heat of the summer.
Most likely you'd plant in the fall or the spring.
Right. So.
I think the downside, if we were to fund it through year-end savings, is again, I would anticipate, as long as it remains a priority of the board, that this is an initiative that we would continue. And so, you know, sort of that continued ongoing need for supplies year over year as we, you know, build out those various, pollinator pathways. So again, this would build it into the operating budget. So it would be available to us year after year, versus if we funded it at year end, it would, you know, be sort of less stable revenue.
So this is an ongoing. This will be a $7,000 ongoing pollinator item.
So I do support this, and I spent 2.5 hours talking to Eric's good friends about this topic, and I learned more about bees and pollination than one would ever know in a lifetime. And it is, actually, I'm not making a joke, it's one of the things that I most appreciate about this opportunity, is you learn about something that you never thought you would. And it is important. This isn't just to have pretty flowers in town.
No.
This is bees, from what I understand, and again, you can check the math on Google, is they have a very limited radius, and if you don't provide these corridors, these pathways, they die. And when they die, we don't have flowers, and that actually, I think human life can only sustain for a month if the bees were to go out of existence. So,
there's the lever.
There it is. Waiting for it. And I am a Republican, despite what I'm suggesting here, but. And again, are we gonna move the needle? No, but are we gonna start something? And it also, I think, is a precursor to lower maintenance costs, which is we got the hook for me in terms of the Aaron horse. My only stipulation is, and the only reason I would suggest doing it as a one-time, is I would love to put a provision that you have to use a Simsbury nursery for the supplies.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we can do that within the budget, but I think we ought to make this a local economic development opportunity because, again, we're always about the lowest bidder and everything else, but for this one, I would love to see us use both nurseries or whomever in town that
Sean, I've been part of a lot of these conversations, and I know the Simsbury Pollinator Pathway people feel quite strongly about supporting, both of the major nurseries in town. And doing that if at all possible.
So how are we require that? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think Tom T, are you still on the line?
Yeah.
Great. Hi, Tom. Any concerns from your end, Orlando, Brian, in terms of being able to secure the supplies you need at the local nurseries? If there was a stipulation with that, any concerns or issues you might see with that?
No, I don't see that, and from my conversations with the pollinator folks as well, is that if we're buying from these local vendors, they're inclined to have more of that inventory on stock for our neighbors to do so as well. So I think that's a good process there.
And I overstep authority. I talked to one of the local vendors about potentially having a donation spot, much like they do for the Simsbury High School garden, where residents can actually buy plants that would then be planted on town ground. So something we can talk about later too.
Okay.
That's neat.
Okay, sounds good.
The only other, I don't want to keep harping on this, but this is just so cool, is that there are a lot of nonprofit organizations and community organizations that are engaged in this just along Hot Meadow. Both churches along Hot Meadow, well, there's actually more than two. The United Methodist, First Church, the Historical Society, ABC House, and I'm sure I'm missing other organizations. The library. They're all doing pollinator gardens, and this is our opportunity to add to that and just amplify the message.
So just for clarity, this is seed money. No.
Literally and figuratively.
Seed money, but is it ongoing, or are we going to be, because where we are, I would hope that in the future that this becomes part of the larger Park and Rec effort rather than us continuing to, because we're going to get at some point as a tough year. I guarantee it. It'll be a tough year. There's going to be some less friendly people up here, and that it's an outside agency. They're going to come up and they're going to make their pitch, and we're going to say, we're going to take you down from 7,500 to 5 to 25 to move the shells around and stuff. So I would just I would hope that the conversation takes place with this organization, which is a fantastic organization, that some of the stuff be moved into the permanent efforts that the Parks and Rec are doing versus an outside agency. That's all.
Yeah. And this money also would not go toward SPK. This is just going toward the town acquiring the plant.
Yeah, so is Tom doing all the planting?
Orlando.
In Orlando.
And Brian and Tom Roy, depending on the location. So it's a joint effort. Yeah.
Because with this is a fantastic. I caution this board from a policy perspective. I brought this up in years past. We have, when we put together our selectmen goals. We often put together that we're going to support an organization, and inevitably within 12 months that support turns into a money ask. So there's always got to think about that. They're not bad money asks, but
I agree with you. In this case, I mean, again, it's called the Pollinator Initiative, but I would call it the Parks and Rec's maintenance cost deferring program. Is another way to do it. And that if you plant something that doesn't need to be mowed and maintained, you're not increasing the department's needs. Is how I'm coming at it.
there's no reason not, unless there's anything that I'm saying has nothing to do with.
No, but we're not writing a check to the pollinator folks. We're having Parks and Rec plant things differently, and I think we need to talk about this as part of a policy decision. And anytime we do improvements, anytime we touch open space, we are preconditioned to put in a nice, beautiful piece of grass that is a useless thing, costs a bunch of money to maintain, puts a bunch of chemicals that screw up the river and everything else in there and makes the sound bloom. And we need to think differently about how do we aesthetically build out the community is really what this is an investment on, to lower our maintenance costs and have a lower impact on the environment.
That's it.
Okay, sounds good.
I take my notes well, Larry.
You did. You paid attention,
I do listen to
Sean.
these meetings.
Yes, but I do watch, but this is not a guarantee that
He wasn't there, actually.
this agency will, this group, I want to be
But
clear.
the money isn't going to a group.
Not going to.
I know, but we're going to get we'll likely get an ask next year to continue the good
I think
work.
it'll be in
just
the
hope so.
operating
Okay,
budget.
fine, that's great. Just want to be clear with some of these
I
conversations.
agree with you, Chris.
Okay. My only stipulation, let's move to the farm's 50th, Tom, is that it stays in the 50th year.
Yeah, no 50, 52 or 53 for this one, all right?
Right.
Barring any unforeseen circumstances.
No, it's 50, that's it. No 4-year committees.
They fund those people.
Yes, that's saints.
they do. Okay.
Okay, great. And then the final bulleted item there was the professional development executive coaching opportunity for our division heads.
Very supportive.
Yeah, the one thing that would be good, and I don't know how we do this, but maybe we talk about it personnel, like how do we hear about the results of some of these, even like your guys, if you guys go to your conferences, come back and just share, improvements or things like that with the board, so we can show the residents the value add to our staff and professionals.
Yeah, we can talk about it at our next leadership team meeting.
I think
and
for the executive
brainstorm.
coaching part, it would be hard to quantify that.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I can share, again, is sort of the qualitative piece, which is our department heads that have participated have made statements, again, like it was life-changing. They're so grateful. I'm so appreciative. This is one of the best things that I've ever done. I think that as an organization, it's just making us a stronger organization because people are growing so much personally and professionally who have engaged in that. And again, that's really more sort of qualitative feedback that we've received. But, I'm really grateful that we've been able to provide those opportunities for our leaders.
From my standpoint, I think it's important as an employer that we show that we're investing in not only department heads, but also the employees at large. And I think that's an important message to send, right? Because we talk about dollars, we talk about pennies, we talk about a lot of things, but in I think the changing demographic and engagement expectations of workers, I think this is a line item that continues to matter. I know it matters to me in my professional space.
And if we do have, I think it's also, sometimes we hear certain people squawk about perceived problems that may exist within town hall and levels of service and interaction, whichever. Well, if that individual doesn't have an opportunity to develop from an outside impartial influence, then that you're only going to be perpetuating whatever that grievance is or gripe is within town hall. This is one of the ways that we can at least invest in potentially always upscaling our top grading our internal talent.
This would become, though, a new annual line item, though, correct? It's not just a one-off.
Yeah.
And this is to expand the people who have access.
Yes,
So I want to be clear with
exactly.
that at the town.
Yeah, so we
Right now we're
have-
providing it, we now want to expand that out.
That's correct, right? So we have our department heads. Those are the folks who generally report directly to myself or Melissa. And then we have our division heads who report to our department heads. So oftentimes they have, a significant amount of scope and responsibility. And, that could be from our building official to our assessor to our 3 division heads at the library. And we did launch just over a year ago an initiative with them. We get together on a quarterly basis. Melissa and I do. And there's a professional development component. The group is somewhat self-directed. We go over highlights. It's just been a great opportunity for them to network. There's a peer mentoring component to that. And again, they've just been really thriving and doing so well. And we'd really like to continue to support their growth and felt like this would be a really nice complement to that work that we're doing with them.
Do they share with their reports, like the next level, the regular staff, not division head, not department head? Do they share, or will they share results or benefits of what they learned in these off-sites or training sessions with the whole team? Is that a
are you
normal?
referring this is executive coaching?
Yeah, I'm saying as an executive coach, if I went to executive coaching, I would bring it back to my team, like the results. Does that happen here at all? I mean,
Well, it depends on, again, if you're coaching on to be more empathetic, each person has different needs. There should be one-on-one
Tailored to
sessions,
their-
so there's not like a, hey, I learned, let's talk about
Right.
this. It's a change in behavior.
This is
It's a softer skill.
Yeah, well-
if it's pure executive coaching, I would think of it in the easiest way you're not getting a therapist, but you're getting a therapist in the
Yeah.
sense that the conversation takes place between just those two. There is the person who's generally what happens in executive coaching is someone like myself identifies that I have some needs, but someone else from the outside says, I think he needs some assistance that I can't provide to him. And it ends there. That person either accepts the opportunity to go to executive coaching, and then hopefully the folks around see that person developing and becoming a better version of themselves professionally. But there is no test that's taken afterward to say, was there a result? Is the person better?
It's not a 360.
Yeah, I was picturing more of like a leadership kind of team group that I've gone to at Optum United Health Group with a group of leaders that met together that did like the Briggs, which quadrant you fall into, driver, and you bring that back to your
We've
team.
done the disc here. We
The disc.
do disc here.
I can tell you probably know what I am. So, anyway.
That's a little bit
It's
different.
Explanation,
actually
Chris.
exactly as Chris just described. I've taken part in it. I've absolutely loved it. And I actually refer to him as my professional therapist.
Wow. Can we get him to work for?
He is great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any more questions on that item? Okay. So if we could just take a quick pause before we jump into the social worker request and the ARPA dollars. It might be good, Amy, do you mind if we just quickly recap with the mill rate worksheet with these potential add-ons? Sure. Thank you. I just want you to have sort of a visual in terms of where we are on operating.
What are we doing now?
She's going to check it tomorrow.
Okay. We didn't talk about the additional departmental requests, even though I just wanted to comment on one of those. I think I talked to Eric. He's like, I'm sorry. For next year to come back and bring back the sustainability coordinator is something we might want to look at next year. Because I think if we can add an officer this year, we're not going to add that person. But if there's savings involved in that position going forward, that might be something we want to bring forward. So just remember next year.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing it up, Lenny. I've been very supportive of that position, and with the idea that it's good for the environment, but also I think is likely going to save us money. And if we did this position, we'd want to establish metrics that ensure that's the case.
Yeah, to switch it from likely to it will.
Yeah,
because if it doesn't, it's not going to last.
It's not going to last.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Unless you sign up.
A 2-year.
It'll be a one-year.
With the energy.
Yeah.
I agree. That's kind of been in the back of my mind.
Okay. So just again, recapping with the service improvement add-ons above, it includes everything you discussed. It looks like Amy added for visual purposes the second police officer. We also, based on conversations that folks had mentioned, and this is something, again, we can talk about within the context of ARPA on that list, is whether or not, if you are in support of the service dog, if you do want to move the annual costs, which were around $10,000 to operating. So we have a little placeholder there that we can discuss under ARPA. And you can see the total service improvement cost, what we can take in for ARPA revenue loss. But then at the bottom blue line, that column there, the row, that is how much to a level mill rate. So again, if you did want to potentially set aside some additional dollars into capital reserve, or set aside some dollars to offset future debt service and assigned fund balance, or potentially just use that for cash for capital to reduce our borrowing, that's what we would have left to work with, again, if you wanted to just have a level mill rate. Otherwise, this budget would still reflect a tax decrease and a mill rate decrease.
Okay, so say this another, we're looking at the blue column, right?
So you can do the whole blue column and put 257 in.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And cash for, yes.
And still be flat on the taxes. If we don't move the cash for capital over, there's a tax decrease that we would send to the Board of Finance.
Correct.
Okay, if we don't move it over?
If we don't do the cash for capital.
I don't, okay, so
Then we would have
not doing that.
That's
I'm
a
just-
we're saying.
just-
Oh, I see.
We can do all the service
Okay.
improvements we just talked about, including the extra police officer, and without moving to the capital conversation, we could send a tax decrease recommendation to the Board of Finance.
Okay.
And what we talked about the other day, and we got concurrence from the Board of Finance chair, is that earmarking that 257 for future capital needs, 400, 257, whatever it is, would be fine.
Which might make next year's a little, like, not, it will help. It will help to smooth it a little bit, as opposed to giving a decrease this year and then having a steeper increase the following year.
Correct.
That's correct.
How this difference is just from Saturdays, if you go back to the one police officer, the net goes to 400, right?
Correct.
It goes
Yeah.
back to
Yes.
400.
Yeah.
And if we do no service improvements, it's the 800 that Amy articulated, so it's the first round of the discussion.
Yep.
So if we want to be super conservative with capital, we do no service improvements, put away 800. Partially conservative with capital, we can do these service improvements and put away the 257, or we can send over a tax decrease recommendation. I'm very supportive of the 550 and the 257. I think it's a solid recommendation overall. I think we've got a unique and opportunistic time with our grand list growth. None of these expenditures, I believe, are frivolous or not standing on their own, even in a tough time. And I think we have an opportunity to solve some problems and give ourselves some flexibility in out years, especially as we talked about with retirement and different vacancies, et cetera. So I don't feel like we're committing the taxpayers to something that can't be undone if it needs to be, if circumstances change. But I think these are wise investments from where we stand today.
Okay. Can I just ask and bring up just a couple of things, because I'm doing my due diligence as a fiscally responsible selectman to our public. Has anybody have any potential offsets to the operating budget where they might see that we could reduce anything? I'm just going to say these, and you don't have to agree. Just saying them as again. So I would look at potentially reducing the legal of $25,000. I know the projected right now, I think it was 68, but given that we only have one, I thought I heard we only have one contract coming up this year, that's $25,000. I was looking at $25,000 out of the police overtime, because I'm just saying, if you're getting another body, I think we could maybe take $25,000. No, out of the
I don't think it's going to happen. It's not going to happen fast
Okay,
enough.
all right, I'm just putting it out there, okay?
It's not going to happen fast enough.
The reality is they're not going to hire these officers when we say go
okay.
until October.
Now, Wendy,
I'm doing
your question is fair, though, because if that overtime number is still there the way it is, we really need to understand. I mean, if we continue to add bodies and we don't.
And it doesn't go down, yeah.
We've got to understand what
Well, I was just saying we keep it the same level as last year instead of going up to 25, but if we have to go up to 25, like I said, I'm just presenting it here.
Correct, because part of the justification from going to, now I gotta remember
Going
new
to
numbers, we go to
275.
2, that would be, we're gonna be like 161 now, so whatever it is, so.
165.
Okay, 165. All right.
Oh, that's what
close.
we will be
But the
with-
part of the justification was overtime.
No.
No, it was separate.
Well,
It wasn't. That was a really small component of it. It's what it's doing to personnel in the organization.
Mandated.
Because of the extended overtime, everything.
Because of the overtime.
Okay.
And just if I may,
1.1.
hiring one, hiring two may have a very small impact on the overtime, but I'll give you an example right now. We are at authorized staff right now. We are at 39 police officers. We are over our annual, we're over our budget amount this year.
Overtime.
Overtime.
Yeah.
By $10,000 this week. So we are not choosing to spend overtime on anything except what we need to.
No, we have
Okay.
to chip away at overtime
Yeah.
through.
Okay, good.
Well, but I think we are funding the staffing study out of ARPA, which should help,
Something thrown in there? I would say,
maybe.
you're gonna see a big
At least understand what we're driving at.
It's good to bring it up.
I have to bring it up because somebody else will bring it up to us, right? And then the only other thing that I was going to ask about, that if somebody here can explain to me, is in the, Tom Taberski's still there, the Parks and Rec Fund, where we're going up from, we were at 180 in 2021, but then we went down to 151, and we're going up $30,000 this year.
It's dispatch?
Oh, is it for me? No.
What? I've never heard that phone before. Oh, it's a building lock? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, please, thank you. Okay, we're good, sorry.
Okay.
Just, somebody got locked out and needed to get back in, but we're good.
So we just started dialing numbers? or
Sorry, it was dispatch called, sorry. I was worried it was an emergency, so thank you, apologies.
Okay, so I'm on there's no page, but the Parks and Rec,
It's in tab 20, right? Yeah.
it's in tab 20, I have it highlighted. So we went from 151 and we're going back up and it says it's to replenish this fund. But it looks like there's still what's the target for this fund, I guess, if the fund balance will be 380?
Funding for the
Target's to
enterprise
break even
fund.
every year. We're not supposed to make or lose money in that fund, right, Amy?
So that's,
Sorry.
That's Simsbury Farm Special
Parks and Rec
Revenue Fund.
Special Revenue Fund.
The idea is to be zero, right? But that's not possible because we're stuck with the weather and everything.
Yeah, you get you get the
Okay.
variables.
so upping that $30,000 does what?
Yeah, so
That's all.
Sure, I can speak to that. I think I may have spoken a little bit to this during my presentation, so I apologize if I'm repeating. But you may recall that gradually over time, we had been increasing the general fund contribution to the special revenue fund. Our extensive analysis showed that the revenue fund has community use expenditures in excess of $300,000. So things like, our program participants are paying for routine things to support the facility that they don't do in any of our other buildings. So again, that was in excess of $300,000, and that we were trying to gradually build up that contribution to help with that inequity that was being placed on the program participants. So we had advanced, I believe, 180, which was level funding last year to the Board of Finance. And on the public hearing evening, they had reduced that contribution, but I was recommending again for equity purposes that we reinstate that contribution.
Okay, that answers that. They may do that again, right?
They might.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
We
okay.
were just trying to keep
I
the
think,
funds on, because when did the taxpayer pay for it, the deficit? Sorry.
Well, no, I was going back to the legal expenses. I guess my thought is that at the end of the day, if we have the need for legal, for whatever comes up, I mean, even if we cut it, we're going to have to find that money from somewhere. And I imagine that the money that you budgeted is your best assessment of what we're going to need in the coming year.
Yeah, that's typically what we think a normal year would look like, again, whether it's contract negotiations or a grievance arbitration or an interest arbitration, or again, complex medical issues, an FMLA, ADA case, that we think that's probably closer to norm. But again, if folks are comfortable, I think for current year, folks said, let's just keep it level funded, and then if you overspend, you overspend. It's not an issue. So if folks have a greater comfort continuing to do that, we can certainly do that.
I do. I appreciate Wendy bringing it up. It was a quick back. We kind of moved over it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
On Saturday, I was scratching my head saying, we seem to be needing less this year. Why are we asking for more?
And Heather actually brought it up on Saturday, so I'm giving her credit for it too.
Yeah, we can make that adjustment in our calculation. We could reduce the HR labor expense by 25.
I agree.
All right, so we're gonna cut 3, no.
Oh. That took me a while to get that. Okay.
You had the police officers until.
Yeah, you shouldn't have shown up.
Where'd you go back?
So we got more 20. Okay.
Okay. Any other initial thoughts on adjustments to operating?
Just need motions.
Okay. Well, and then the one other piece I would recommend is that we move on to the ARPA spreadsheet, because there could potentially be, I think, an operating impact with the service dog in particular. And then I thought we could also have a conversation about the proposed social worker within the ARPA conversation as well.
Can I just make a general comment, and this being my first time through this and going through all this? I guess what kind of strikes me is that, and I know kind of gets brushed upon with different departments and different things, but I would love to see a tab that is titled something along the lines of savings initiatives and growth opportunities, and kind of look at what we've done to look for inefficiencies, what we've done for savings initiatives, and what we've actually saved, what we're looking to do in those areas in the upcoming year. Just seeing a little more of that.
Yeah, so what we can get for you, Heather, we do prepare a communication on an annual basis for the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to that effect. We usually do it, is it September? Mm-hmm. September. I believe it's usually September or August, but we do provide that on an annual basis, and we can get you that information.
Okay. Yeah, it just struck me that tonight.
I would say that from Heather, from what I've, so I'm thinking big picture, you're thinking granular, so and I made a misstatement today, like I don't care about $500. I didn't mean it that I do. But what I have noticed is what I pick up on, your ask should be followed through. But when I think about the things I've heard in the last 5 years. How long have we been doing this for? 5 years. So we start thinking about the radio, the emergency services and radio response, and we were looking at $2.5 million, and all of a sudden, through the efforts of town staff and further work, we find a way to do that in another way, and we save $2.5 million. The shared service with Bloomfield, the moving Tom into this position.
We bought the street lights.
So there are these, a lot of times you have these big things which would have otherwise resulted in significant impacts to the budget and to the taxpayer. So I think we lose sight of those sometimes because we're up here going, oh man, we just keep on just spending more money, keep adding and adding and adding and spending. And you're right, you should say, well, tell us where we're nibbling around the edges and how you're transforming government on a small level.
Well, I think those things are important for the taxpayer to see in the community, because it gets lost in the whole process, and then I think that is just would be a good thing to point out.
Some of us, it's hard, but like we bought the streetlights and we joked that they were the golden streetlights. What were they, $1 million? But we saved $95,000 to $110,000 a year in electricity as a result. So there was it was a 9.5, whatever it was, year payback. So the Board of Finance fronted us the money off budget for a supplemental to go do that. So, but you're absolutely right.
But that'd be good to see in a tab.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is.
Yeah, it's almost the running list of spend to save initiatives is what we used to call them. So, and then again,
I think our even greater opportunity is to continue to talk to the public about all these things that they might not hear about.
Exactly.
Really good point.
And one of the things I applaud Maria and Melissa and Amy and Francine. You're starting to come hear out of Maria's mouth as she always prefaces, I think I may have found a way. And that's what I've been hearing and listening to. And I mean, the work that we're doing at the Board of Ed, those are big things that are occurring. And I'm not saying that the form of government we previously had wasn't able to find these accomplishments, but I do think that we are operating at a higher level when we're looking for the streamlining and efficiencies of government than we have possibly in the past. Not because of people, but just because of we're having a different dialogue amongst people.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a great conversation, and we'll definitely get you that list, and really welcome and appreciate any opportunities you all have to share those, because I'm really proud of the team, and I think that whether it's looking for efficiencies or thinking about our long-term, stability, they've done some really, really great work with, again, some savings that are big ticket items. I will just point to another one where it's really going to only show up sort of in the long term, but for example, with restructuring the police pension plan, we're estimating savings of $1 million over 15 years, which is really substantial, and that won't necessarily show up easily, right, in a line item. It's just one of those things in terms of our long-term overall financial health. It's really going to help and count in a big way. So we'll definitely get you the list, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
What's on deck now?
Great. All right, so we have our ARPA spreadsheet. If we could, right before we jump into, again, the social worker, there was one item I thought we could talk about with the ARPA funding, which was around the service dog, just as we were trying to finalize that operating budget spreadsheet, because that will help Amy and Melissa greatly as they're preparing their work for us simultaneously. There was a suggestion perhaps that we fund the vehicle for the police officer that would be the handler, that we fund that with capital reserve money that had originated with the private duty funding, as opposed to ARPA. And then the estimated, it was about a $10,000 annual cost rather than funding that with ARPA, that we move that into the operating budget. So again, just so we could perhaps finalize that operating budget list, was wondering how folks would feel. Again, there's sort of two pieces to that, is that if you are supportive of the service dog, moving that $10,000 expense into the operating budget. The second piece being the vehicle, and if you would prefer to pay for that out of capital reserve. Again, that's assuming if, in fact, you are supportive of the request.
And that was part of that a stipend for the officer in addition to this care of the dog?
Yep, so that would include, we would have to negotiate that with the union. We would be required to provide compensation to the handler. That is something that we would have under a wage and hour requirement, essentially a legal requirement to provide a stipend. We would need to negotiate that with the union. And so we have just had a very preliminary conversation and shared with them that if in fact this were to proceed, we understand that we would need to negotiate with them over a stipend. So that's sort of an estimate at this point.
But if it's higher, we may not, I mean, just saying, if it's that or lower, but if it gets higher, because it's fairly costly.
Right. And the chief did do, I think, a very thorough and extensive analysis that I reviewed in terms of other communities that have handlers and what their compensation and what their stipends are. So I think he provided us with a pretty good, reasonable estimate.
Okay.
So the $10,500 is not the stipend, correct? It's to care. It's the food and vet services.
It would
correct?
be both.
Wasn't there a $2,000 for vet in there? Yes.
Yeah, so there was the stipend that was sort of an estimate that was separate, and then a rough estimate about $2,000 for the annual expenses for any veterinary expenses, which would include food and other incidentals that you would need, like a replacement of a collar and things like that. And not to throw a little bit of a wrench into that, but Mark Rudowitz, our animal control officer, former animal control officer, has sort of been working on this over the years, and there are a ton of people out there who are willing to support with some of that. So, that's just going to be another avenue that will probably help in a different way. It just not help with this conversation today, except, future sort of know-how.
Only in the public sector can you get paid to have a dog as a friend.
I was just going to say, I bet that some of those smaller expenses could be offset through donations, because I think people would be pretty
We
incentivized.
got some things going.
Yeah.
So that, but does that, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was also going to ask about the car, because my understanding is that this isn't just like a car that's specific for the dog. It will have cage and some specific equipment in it, but this is a vehicle that could be used for regular service. So we're not.
Absolutely. The only difference is that there would, instead of being a prisoner cell in there,
Right.
there would be a kennel in there. And we expect that the life of this car will be almost 3 times the life of a regular car. But it will look no different than what you see out there now for a patrol car, except you may see a dog's face on it, sticker or the name of the dog, something like that to draw some attention.
But like if for some reason something happened with having the service animal, we would not be out like, we bought this vehicle and now we have no use for it. This would be something that is still an asset we can use in the department.
And I would ask that it be painted a little more inviting.
Does the naming rights committee get to name the dog?
The dog is already named.
It's named.
It is?
So the dog gets trained already.
Yeah, it comes in.
So changing the name probably cause a little bit of an issue.
Oh, so do we know,
Yeah.
do we have a name?
No. It comes.
It comes with the dog that we have to approve.
Well, that's actually, you could do that. You could preempt, whichever channel you're going to be buying it from, you're going, you could say, hey, you're.
$107 million. We want to know what the dog's name is.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way in the sense that, if you bought a dog from a breeder before, they often try to match what your needs are and the dog's personality already. And that's actually what happens here. So there's a time where our handler will go down and will be interacting with 3 or so dogs to be able for them to pick which one best. So we won't know a name until
So I have one more question, because what I'm hearing is we may get donations towards that $2,000, right? The $2,000. Does it make sense to not put that in the operating and to put that somewhere else so that if
we're gonna have to pay this.
Yeah, you can't guarantee it.
No, not that, I'm saying the stipend, we know it's gonna be it's gonna be, but the vet fees and the sundry for the dog, do we have a special dog revenue fund? I don't know. I'm just saying.
So I gotta say this.
That's fine.
I love dogs more than anything in the world. I had to. My one dog passed away. I have another one. I love dogs. This is not a problem we're trying to solve. This is something fun that we want to do.
It is fun. Okay.
And I really don't think we ought to be doing this with taxpayer dollars.
Oh.
I don't think this makes sense.
Okay.
I get that everybody's excited about it. I love dogs. I want to sign up and be the guy that handles this dog, but this doesn't feel like this is a nice to have. This is not something we need.
I couldn't agree more, but I voiced that already. Numerous occasions.
This is not something we need.
So I went, I did like a 180 on this. I thought at first I thought it was purely fun and I didn't see a lot of value. And then hearing the chief's explanation, I think especially around encouraging the community to engage with the officers handling the dog and bringing people closer to our police, getting to know them. I think that has a real benefit. But I don't disagree, Sean, in how it should be paid for. So I'd be willing to entertain that conversation.
And one other thing that I would like to just, as a proponent of it, I think it also, it will add, as you noticed, you just mentioned, John, I think from a health and wellness of the officers downstairs, the energy that an animal will bring into that. I bring a dog to my office. My employees are, they become 50% less effective. But it's but it changes people's how they feel about being in the office. And I bet you we could actually bring something that's experiential to the officers as well internally with us. So that's investing in our police.
I'll go along with it, but it's the first thing we cut if the Board of Finance pushes back, in my opinion.
Okay, well, we'll make it.
But it's also something that's there's a component of okay.
What's the pushback to using ARPA money on this?
We got to put some of it in operating because we're gonna have to pay this person.
Ongoing. It's
right. Got it.
Right, 10.
I just also with the ARPA funding potentially being cut back to not getting the second tranche. I also don't, I just think if it ends up that we only have 3.6 and we put a service dog in that first tranche, it's concerning to me because I think there are better spends with ARPA dollars.
I'm in support of that statement.
That's a good statement too.
But we can't wait on.
Can we do supplemental? Remember our policy?
Well, I think the more we do in the budget, the easier it is for us to kind of be done with some of the ARPA stuff.
It is, but it eliminates, as Heather says, dollars that we then can't use if it doesn't work in our favor when we get the other one. And I would rather give to a nonprofit than have a service dog. Is my personal opinion.
Yeah, and then there's the revolving, the facade program and things like that we haven't even gotten into. But I just think although it's not a huge amount of money, I think there are better spends with that money to benefit the community than
So I'm not sure if I'm yet hearing consensus on moving forward with the dog, but if there is consensus on moving forward with the dog, again, I'm not quite sure if I'm hearing consensus on operating versus ARPA.
Well, the bulk of the purchase is being covered by ARPA. Acquisition, correct?
It could be, or it was also suggested to us that we utilize the capital reserve fund, which just has sufficient funding from some of the private duty funds that were originally moved to that fund.
Okay, so that's my own fault for misunderstanding. I thought that the bulk of the acquisition, both the retrofit and the animal itself, were being proposed through the ARPA program.
It was.
And then the ongoing costs, which we're addressing here, which is a $10,000 budgetary add for ongoing.
So I guess if we
maintenance.
If we don't have a consensus on the dog, then we don't need to talk about the 10,000 in our operating. So maybe we should.
I'm a no for ARPA right now because when you look at this ARPA list, $75,000 for a dog or to replace a pavilion at Terrifield Park, $75,000 for, there's all these items on here that I think are more important to the town, personally, and benefit the town better.
I think so. So I think they all benefit the town. It's about personal. It's about understanding which one benefits more. So I appreciate what you're saying.
And my other thing is I'm still hopeful that we're getting the second half of the money, and that we would have, because at one point, remember, we didn't think we'd be able to spend the money. Now it's like we have so much that so I'm just saying, we don't know that yet, and I don't know if that weighs into it, but we're going to know in June if we're getting this money.
So let's just do this the good old fashioned way.
Right.
I move that we include 10,000 in the operating budget for the maintenance and cost and whatever stipend of the dog.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have concerns about the dog versus the social worker.
Somebody has to second that?
Right.
Can I second?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, no
Now there'll be
discussion.
Sorry.
So what do you say, Amber?
Well, I'm saying we also need to revisit the request for social workers, which to me, the service animal and a social worker are, both of them are kind of, reaching out and touching, especially people that might be, going through trauma. I know that the service animal, both of them kind of fill the same kind of ARPA bucket of wellness, mental wellness. And so I don't want to vote on a dog if that means we're not going to support a social worker, as much as I love both. And I know, we'd like to do everything, but with adding a new police officer because of the understaffing, and then looking at a therapy animal and looking at a social worker, we might have a choice to make. And my choice might be different if it's putting in a social worker versus spending the money on the animal. So I'm willing to look at it that way if we have to make choices. So
I agree with that.
Well, we could just continue on with the ARPA conversation and jump next into the social worker.
I think maybe if we do that.
There's a motion and a second on the table, so.
Oh, right.
Well, for the dog.
There's these whole rules thing that we gotta follow, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
No, it's okay.
I guess that's why I was trying to say what I said before we made the
Yeah,
motion.
that's a good, I'm glad, Amber, yeah, we kind of.
Well, the chair acknowledged the motion and made a
I
second.
did. So,
Table or
but-
withdraw?
Pardon me?
You said perhaps table or withdraw and revisit it?
So the motion would need to be retracted, and I'm not, so.
Okay.
It's time to call the question.
Okay, all right, so, all those in favor of adding $10,000 to the operating budget for the rescue dog, say aye. I'm gonna say aye.
Contingent upon, yeah. All right.
Well, we're
all
not
those
voting
who
on the
oppose-
budget right now, and that, so we could change this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just- it's just-
This is
Okay,
just-
I'm just saying,
yeah.
I'm saying
So
aye,
at the moment,
and
I'll-
all those who, not in favor, say nay.
I guess I'm,
Okay, so that's,
I haven't
I was
voted
aye.
yet.
you were an aye?
Aye.
Okay, I'll
I know it's
say
tough.
aye.
It's tough.
Well, I don't like how this was,
Yeah, it's tricky, because we don't know where we're
well,
going.
it shouldn't be
We may
tricky.
Come back,
It's not tricky, guys. All it is,
I-
the motion was to add it to the list.
okay, so we
And you
have
vote on the
We can-
budget.
two,
we can pull it
two
off.
nays,
We do
we
this
have
all the
two
time.
ayes, two
This
ayes,
is our job.
so you guys.
I voted in favor of it.
I voted in favor.
Okay, so we have a 4-2, so that
And you can
passes.
change your mind when we talk about the social worker. I'm just trying to move the conversation along. So
Okay,
let's talk
great.
about the social worker.
Okay, great. So we're just going to pull up a few slides on that. The board, we listened to your questions on Thursday evening, and I hope we have been able to answer some of those questions. Melissa's just going to pull up a couple of slides that I thought would be again hopefully helpful in answering those questions. And
These are the
I'll-
ones that you sent today.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, yep. I'll cover a few at the beginning. I have Kristen add a little bit. There was some data that we included that we hope will be helpful and illustrative to you. Again, for the interest of time this evening, we didn't think it would necessarily make sense to go slide by slide on the data, but again, perhaps some of those higher level questions that you all had that we would very much like to answer. Thanks, Melissa. All right. So the initial proposed service improvement, as you know, were two social workers. Our thought was one to focus more on youth and families. So again, those traditional YSB duties, which is Youth Service Bureau, and a community social worker. Our priority, however, after listening to the conversations on Thursday and Saturday, if we were to move forward with a social work position, our priority would be particularly in the area of youth and families. We do think that is where we are currently seeing a greater need for service. Our thought was that the positions would be interim. I know the conversation went down a little bit of a dream, sort of what if type of a scenario on Thursday night, but really the intention, and I think this goes back to Tri-Board when I mentioned the need for these positions and what I was seeing at the time is that the positions would be interim to begin. I think it's really important to note that this would really be providing and expanding services that we're not currently offering, or perhaps services that we're offering on a limited basis. And, I think what we've done a good job in showing to you all is that we'd like to evaluate whether or not there's an ongoing need, how effective a program is. When we bring these sort of new programs and new initiatives to you, again, I think we've done a good job of telling you we think it's worthwhile, or it's not worthwhile to continue going. And again, since we have not provided many of these services in the past, I'm just not comfortable telling you that, oh yes, if we add this position now, I think we should continue on with it indefinitely into the future. Next slide. So just in terms of some trends with what's happening today, again, what I think Kristen did a nice job sharing previously, but again, we're really just finding that parents are seeking support. It's currently very difficult to access mental health services with demand exceeding available providers. Folks are really frustrated when they can't find a provider timely. It adds to the difficulty of their situation. And I think this is perhaps, again, where our conversation went a little astray on Thursday night. And I want to apologize if we gave the impression that by hiring additional social workers at the local level that we would somehow fix the mental health crisis, right? This isn't going to fix the mental health crisis, but I think it's a part of the solution. In terms of being able to offer resources at the local level, and that we would be able to provide, again, some mental health services and well-being services at the local level for all of our residents, regardless of their resources. And if this is helpful for folks, we can walk through this. If not, we can skip this. So I just wanted to pose the question, would it be helpful to you all for Kristen to walk you through sort of what happens today when a youth is experiencing a crisis, or when an adult comes to their offices who is experiencing a crisis, what they do to provide support at this point in time, and again, how that might differ in the future. If that's helpful, we can walk through those sort of scenarios, and if not, we can move forward.
I feel like I've had a lot of conversations on this topic in the last week, and I feel comfortable moving forward.
Okay, great.
I'm more interested in what does success for the pilot look like, and what are those measurables? How would we determine that we did what we said we were going to do?
Yeah, sure. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So one of the questions that folks had asked was, I think, again, like what exactly is a more traditional youth service bureau? What are some of the types of programs and services that they provide? And how does a municipal youth services social worker differ from a school social worker? While they're related fields, they are different disciplines. An example I might use in comparison is that while professional librarians often go to school for a master's degree in library science, they typically go two routes: academic libraries or public libraries, right? Related fields, but different disciplines. And so a municipal youth services social worker is a bit of a different discipline from school social workers. So I'll just maybe let Kristen speak to these next few slides a little bit.
So here we're wanting to give you some examples of what positive youth development would entail. And that's one of the mainstays of the Youth Service Bureau, is to provide programs and services that help our youth to thrive in their community. Oh, that just makes it even more comfortable.
So some of the things that the positive youth development would entail would be an intentional pro-social approach, engaging with the youth within the communities, within organizations, peer groups, and with the families. And part of that is recognizing and utilizing the youth's own strengths, and promoting positive outcomes for young people by providing opportunities, fostering relationships, and helping to support and build on leadership strengths. So one example that I would give you for an idea that we had is, there's been a lot of conversation around the youth in town, and that there's been more negative incidents. We're seeing that our youth are encountering the police more, that we've had more incidents of vandalization within the community. And that some of our JRB cases have become more severe and involving victims. So one of the examples that we thought of was, if we had this youth social worker, on the half days, we could actually go down to the PAC. We could actually go and have a program at the band shell. We're going to try to meet the kids where they are, and provide those positive opportunities, rather than the kids just being unsupervised and unstructured on an after-school half day. These are some examples of programming and service opportunities that we thought of, and also some items that other successful youth service bureaus provide. So play groups. Rachel shared a lot this morning or this afternoon about, why a play group is an important opportunity. It's an important opportunity because at the beginning of their life, you're already instilling positive behaviors and good peer relationships with the youth. You're also connecting the moms who are going to support each other and learn from each other. And hopefully, if we have a youth that we can teach in the beginning that, we don't bite our friends, that's going to help them to know when they're in high school, we don't punch our friends. So we want to start early. And then, these are some of the other things that we could offer. The Safe Dates, for example, is a program that we've already purchased, but we haven't been able to implement it. And then homework clubs, I know that that's something that was brought up on Thursday, was, okay, after school once a week, instead of, playing Xbox, can you come in and work on your homework together with your peers? And then, of course, one of the big things is offering support for our parents and educational opportunities for our parents on how to handle any negative youth behaviors.
So I love all that. Where's the connection to get people to use those services? That's the part I'm struggling with. So we can have all the events we want, right? But if folks don't bring their kids down, particularly the ones that need to benefit, and that's the cycle. And it's just one of the things I struggle with, and probably my uneducated perspective is, if the kids are unsupervised, if they're having these challenges, are there fractures or structure in the home life that's a cause? And how are we going to get those kids to then participate if nobody at home is paying attention?
and I wish I had a magic answer for that, but we're willing to try, any means necessary to try to get them involved.
I agree. So, and again, maybe this is misplaced, but I mean, is that where, hey, we're going to have 20 programs a year and our goal is expert? I mean, like, I'm a numbers guy. When I get down to 2 years from now, you're going to tell me that we had 57 programs and we're going to say, well, how many people? Well, we don't know. Well, it's like, okay, well, we just spent $500,000. Should we spend another $500,000? And
Sure.
we had 20 programs isn't going to be enough for me to say we should spend another $500,000.
So I think if I'm understanding you correctly, part of the question is to, demonstrate what the success rate was. And
I don't even know if that's possible, I guess is what I'm asking. Is that even a fair thing to ask of you?
Sure. Well, current metrics that we use, currently what we do with a lot of our YSB dollars is we provide funding to the school social workers and we provide funding to the library, and they have been, implementing program or purchasing materials. And part of that is that in their grant request, they have to project to us how many youth they think that will be impacted by the program that they're proposing. And then following the program, they have to turn in statistics to us. So we know exactly how many children participated, what their ethnicity is, we correct all of those demographics. Not only because we want to be able to demonstrate to you if we were successful, but because we have to report back to the state of Connecticut Department of Children and Families on the dollars that we spent and how many kids were assisted. So I could even give you those statistics from, not this year because we're not done yet, but last year as a sample. How many kids did we help at the library? How many kids benefited from XYZ program? So I would do that the same way.
Okay.
So how, I guess, to Sean's question, how do you really advertise for it? But how also does it conflict with, a lot of the schools have homework after school programs in place. And, you look at the middle school and high school, they are so open to any kind of club started or any way that makes you feel, makes a student feel connected with other students, and it's something that's very kind of different. And I don't know, when you look at those programs, and the libraries had so many programs for kids and teens, how in those areas of the social work area are you competing or overlapping as what you're offering?
I don't think it would be either. I think it would be different. I don't think that we would have the same clubs as the high school or the middle school. And I think it would be different. Part of what we would do is we take a very holistic approach. So if we get to know a kiddo or a family, whereas the school might just look at one issue or one concern, we're going to be looking at what's the whole picture of the family and what are the possibilities that we can provide assistance to that family. So say, for example, if someone reaches out to me for assistance with their electric bill, I go through a list of questions and I get to know what's going on with them. And then I may offer them 4 more services that they didn't even know that they needed, but they could benefit from. So that's part of what, our hope is with these families. We had a very, very intense JRB case this morning. It was completely unprecedented. And, my list was going in my head of, what other things can we potentially offer this family? Because if there's something happening, there's a reason that something's happening. And there's probably services that they could benefit from. And that's the holistic approach of your municipal social worker versus your school social worker.
So to that end, do you have the ability, or are you tracking, like, hey, they came for rental assistance, or hey, they came for food, and I want to be able to offer them these, but I can't? And going forward, are we be able to quantify that?
It's not something that I've quantified before. That's an interesting thing to try to track. I'm sure we could probably come up with some way.
System.
That's essentially what it is, right? Is we have, you have probably more calls for service than any other department in town, right? So other than the police department, obviously, but and X percent are rental assistance or income issues, X percent are, and we breaking that down again. We got to respect people's confidentiality, and I appreciate that. But the higher level metrics, and then again, there's this whole bucket of we want to, but we can't.
Mm-hmm.
And these programs, I presume, fall into that we want to, but we can't. And now when they call for service, when it's rental assistance, you're going to go through that checklist. And again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but we had 287 calls for electricity assistance, and 50% of them, I identified a need where we needed to go further with this social worker. I mean, is that possible as we go through this pilot, as we go through this learning experience?
I think so. I think it's just something that we would have to kind of wrap our heads around and come up with the mechanism of like, how are we going to track that?
And there's two reasons for that. Sorry, I know I keep jumping in, but one, help us quantify what success looks like. And then two, what's the demand, right? We do everything based on demand of services, and we don't, and again, this is not a criticism, but this is a tough spot. We don't have a good baseline for what is the demand, right? So we're going to throw a person or two and hope it moves the needle. And I want to be able to have a conversation that not only did it move the needle, but we've actually identified that we need 4 people, right? That's the kind of conversations I want to get to is how do we provide this service for this community? Or it turns out, you know what? It was a blip. We're good on the staffing. We only need 1 going forward. I don't know where it's going to lead us to, but that's the kind of conversation I want to have in a year or two around this, so that we are funding the community's needs in this space or putting the dollar somewhere else.
And I think it's hard right now because with the little data we've received, it's difficult to even see where is the needle now to compare it to in a year's time.
Yeah, if I could jump in. So I think, again, for board members, you may recall that last year we had requested funding and it was supported to provide electronic database to the social services department so they could begin to track client data electronically. Yep. Unfortunately for Kristen, she inherited a department that was still very antiquated in the sense that everything was paper-based, which when you're trying to pull data, do analysis, and makes it very difficult. Right. So following some retirements of staff members, your support for the funding, we did acquire, it's called Charity Tracker, which is, again, a software system that's often used by municipal social workers in Connecticut. And we just implemented that this fiscal year. So that is something we are building out at this point in time. But again, I think having that data moving forward and having that system, it's going to help us to be able to better, track data, analyze the data that we have on our clients. And again, so that's something that's still new and in progress. And I think one of the things that's, hard, again, having come from a very paper-based system, is that we do have to somewhat rely on the qualitative sort of feedback and data in terms of, again, just the demand that we've been seeing on Kristen's staff, particularly during the pandemic.
I agree. Yeah, but
so the conversation, I think we kind of, for me, you kind of got off track in the sense that I think we started talking about what would be the service ads, what we could be doing. We were illustrating things that Sean was asking about. But I thought we started this conversation because you saw either two things are occurring. We have an increase in incidences, or we have an increase in severity, or we have both occurring. Okay, so that's where, and so I'm not. This is kind of we need some numbers to work off of right now. None of us up here could possibly try to quantify what it's to be in your shoes and your staff's shoes to pick up that phone and then to make a determination of what that weight is. Is this twice as bad as it was last time, or whichever it is? So, but we have such limited, quantitative information to help you with. So that's why when we have the conversation today that there's increase of incidences at school, physical altercations. It scares me to think that from a liability standpoint that we wouldn't actually be charting and tracking every single time a person touches another person. If we can't run a data dump and pull out the different kinds of actionable items where a person touched another, then we have a problem. So that's something that would basically where I could start with. Okay, so we had 10 fights in 2022, and we had 5 last year. That's the kind of thing where I'm starting with, because that's how we led. So those are all additive of what you would do with this. But I thought the initial start was we need to address, you're overwhelmed. And you don't have enough time in your day or the skills or you were personally equipped with to address the issues that you're facing. Because the stuff that's listed on there is somewhat additive about how we prevent the things that this person may find themselves in. Mm-hmm. We diffuse ahead of time. We provide coping skills. But what I saw today and what I heard today was you're over, just like the chief is. you guys are, you're outmanned to a certain extent to basically to respond appropriately to what you're facing. So how can we help us with that kind of data to move this in support of or not? And then the other thing that we think about is that I do appreciate the trying to educate us in the difference between a school social worker, and because the social work that the school person is involved with is initiated because of an academic event. It's not initiated because Officer Cushman saw someone fight on the band shell. The school doesn't get involved at all in now there's probably something going on, but I think that's what we have to talk about, is that are we going to elevate the level of social work that we can services we can provide to our residents to become specialized into the youth area? Because I'll finish here. If I heard correctly, because we're always good at benchmarking off of other towns, we're the only town of the ones we like to benchmark ourselves against that does not have a youth service asset in your department. Is that correct?
Yes, and I was able to get some numbers from some of our surrounding towns. And sorry, I don't know.
So that's what I'm saying, is that because they may be a resource for you to help us. They may be a resource. Why did Farmington choose to how many do they have?
Farmington has 2.
2. We've got 0. So why did they make the choice to? It may simply be they may have the same number of overall social workers divided between Board of Ed and town services, but they may or not. That's kind of the thing that helped me.
Confused me again, because I thought we were going down the road of we were piloting this, and what you just led me to believe is that there's a need that's not being addressed because we're not staffed appropriately for the influx of requests.
Well,
and that's not a pilot. That's we don't have enough staff.
Well, the pilot is thank you, Sean. I think that we're looking at this because of the mechanism that's been brought to us that would allow us to fund this, not necessarily the question would be, would we be doing this absent of ARPA? I think that's part of the question we have to ask ourselves.
What you just said, it sounds like yes.
That's what I'm saying, but then doesn't it, so regardless, whether it's ARPA or not, shouldn't we be putting everything else off the table and looking at this then? And that's the way so how do we get to that answer? That's not because the money's there. I need data to help me to say that we should be doing this, whether it's pilot or not. I thought we had a problem, I thought we had we've evolved to a new level of challenges.
So Kristen, the other towns, did they start these programs because of COVID, or do they already have them in place?
Oh, no, they're
Long-standing. YSBs are long-standing.
Yeah, in most of these neighborhood towns.
And I wanted to share, in a couple of the slides, we do have some more data points. But again, like Maria said, there isn't a lot else that I could bring to the table for data other than what's already there. The school piece, that would, I think, be an ask of the Board of Ed. We wouldn't have access to that. And I think it is twofold. There's a slight increase in the incidences, but it's the increase in the severity that was concerning to us. And it's not whether or not my staff is tapped out or maxed out. It's that, we could do all these other things, but we can't. And we're responding to the asks, but on a very limited basis. For me, it's more about, do we want to be able to offer more and do a better job?
Well, and I just want to make one point, because the way it was targeted as ARPA, is that we're looking at this as an impact of the pandemic.
Correct.
So if we look at it as an impact of the pandemic, we're hoping that it's not permanent, that it's short term, right? Which goes to, do we do it as the pilot for 2 years? And then we have this new data charity tracker, which we may be able to get better data out of. Do we do it for 2 years?
And I don't want to prolong it, but that's where I'm confused, because Farmington has 2, Avon has 1, we have none, and they had those pre-pandemic. So is it the pandemic or not?
Well, but we've never gotten asked, have we had a service improvement request for a social worker in the last?
Yes, we got a new social worker in 2018.
Okay.
All I'm trying to uncover is, are we really doing a pilot here because it's the pandemic and it might go away, or are we trying to meet a basic level of service that this community doesn't have, that candidly we should have. And then that's not a pilot. We're changing our service level in the community.
Yeah,
And I guess I'm looking, I am genuinely looking at it as a pilot in that we have this ARPA dollars, so we could do it without a mill rate impact. And this is an expanded set of programs that you'd be offering. And I think it would be really important to think upfront thoroughly how it would be tracked and measured. But then looking at it, and whether it's 2 years or 4 years, it's not that I'm hoping that it stays or I'm hoping that it goes away, but I think that if we can show that these are well used and there's other benefits to the community, then I'd be very interested in continuing, assuming we can show the benefit.
And can afford it.
I mean, I can't speak to whether or not it will go away in 2 years, the problem, not the position.
Yeah.
And I think I can argue both sides of the coin. Like you're right, Sean, that these other towns have already had YSBs and it's a long-standing, program of social services. But we're seeing an increased need because of the pandemic. So I think it's hand in hand. And whether or not our kiddos are going to recover in 2 years as the pandemic passes, that's the hope. That's the goal, right? We all want to recover. We're all experiencing additional stressors from the pandemic. But for some of us, it will be permanent, especially with these young kiddos that are experiencing severe anxiety, depression, being diagnosed with PTSD. Like those are diagnoses that more than likely won't go away. We're going to help them to manage them, but it's not going to revert to pre-pandemic that all of a sudden I don't have PTSD anymore.
So you mentioned before, I think Thursday, that a component of this is due to the fact that it's really hard to get anyone in for referrals. And so they become stagnant. They have a problem, whether it's at school or come to you, and that they're not getting through the referral process to see someone. So is that still a component of it, or is it?
That was more of like a concern and a trend that we're seeing, that it's really difficult for the families to get their kiddos into treatment, and adults too. This isn't just a kid problem. We're not going to fix it because we're clinical social workers, but we're not therapists. So we're never going to try to sell that to you. But what else can we do to support the family along the way while they're waiting? Even just helping a parent with some education. Okay, like you might be waiting 3 or 4 weeks and your kiddo is experiencing anxiety. Here are some things that you can do with them at home to help them have coping skills and to strategize to help them through their day while you're waiting to see a therapist. And then the therapist is going to work on the diagnosis and how to work through that.
Well, Kristen, and isn't it also the case that if there was a dedicated person to be able to work on those issues, then that person can develop relationships with the professionals and kind of pull together more of a network to help with referrals because they've made connections with the people that they're referring to. If we don't really have anybody doing that right now, then it's up to parents. And, even though there's social workers in the schools, I don't know that they're really available that much for parents to come to and say, how do I help my child that has depression or anxiety, is suffering from school avoidance? Not every issue results in like a fight. Mm-hmm. You could just have kids that are like, I don't want to leave my room. Yeah. I don't want to go to school. Right. And every day before they go to school, they're, freaking out because of what it's been like. So I think that like being able to, provide some services to the family as a whole, because, the parent is probably not going to be able to walk into the school and sit down and necessarily talk to the social worker and get the referrals and get kind of like a whole family support. The child may be able to go in if they're having a problem in class, but it's really, I think the focus there is to keep the child in class and learning, because that's what school is for. Yeah. That's a little different than the support that the entire family could be getting from a dedicated social worker in that situation.
Right, exactly. You're absolutely correct. Your school social worker that works, 8 to 3 and is not available during summer breaks and all of the vacations that schools get, I'm here throughout the year. Rachel's here throughout the year. And we do take that holistic approach. So the kiddo that goes to school that maybe doesn't have enough to eat, but that's not the role of the school social worker to find out how to feed that child. That's my role, is to figure out what can we do, because we know that a child is not available for learning if they go to school hungry. So it's a school-based issue, but it's a home-based issue too. And when you sit down with a school social worker, and I'm pontificating because I'm not a school social worker, but maybe they would help you with your free or reduced lunch application. But if you come to me, I'm going to make sure that you're getting energy assistance, that you have food assistance, that your electricity is not getting turned off, because all those are adult stressors that impact the children. And if you're not sleeping well, or you're not well nourished, or you're picking up on the stress and anxiety of your parents, you're not available for learning. Like, how can I care about biology when I don't have electricity?
So with some of these, would there be referrals from the school social workers to your group?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's something I haven't tracked, but I can make sure that I go back to the office and we start thinking about tracking that. But we get calls and emails from the school social workers all very frequently, like, hey, this one needs help with this one needs help with that. Can you meet with this family? We just never know. As social workers, we get it all. There's no, this is the list of things that we deal with. We get phone calls for everything.
So it sounds like there was a need originally for this. So this sounds to me like, and I'll steal Chris's phrase, this is a baseline service that we probably should have had in the first place. So we have the fortuitous position of, we have ARPA funding to help feather this into the budget.
Right.
So I'm split in the middle here. Is I support this position. I support using ARPA funding for 2 years as a pilot. I want to tie the job description changes and the supervision stuff as a different appropriation to that pilot design, those metrics, et cetera, so that there's a deliverable that comes back to us. Because it sounds like this is probably going to be a baseline need that we'll have to figure out how to fund in the taxpayer paid for budget at some point. But I'm not going to push to do that in the operating budget this year, is where I'm at least.
So there are 4 positions here for.
I was letting the school ones. I'm okay with the school ones is where I stand.
I think I'm good with the 2 school ones, and I would be comfortable with the one community social worker.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong word. The YSB, the youth social worker. But perhaps if there was, it sounds like, from what the chief shared, that there could be an opportunity to partner with the police department. So perhaps there'd be an opportunity for them to review some of those cases that would be appropriate.
Yeah, and I'm good. My friend Sean, I feel like sometimes we use the word pilot to state we're going to have that there's a defined guardrail that it's going to be gone potentially for something. But why I have been maybe mishearing, but the way I looked at this again is that it's clearly something that is in the headlines bolded in ARPA, mental health. Right. You can't get any clearer than that. Mm-hmm. And so I saw it, and then when I heard that it's either incidence or severity, because to me, you use the word pilots, we're trying stuff that's new, that's been brought to us to see if it has an effect. I think we actually have a need that wasn't there 2 years ago and to address. So I just caution the sense that I think it's actually something real. So we are missing on delivering a service right now because there's a new need.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to be. But I'm also 100%, which is why I brought it the other day, is that once it becomes intertwined, that's barbed wire in a rat's nest in mousetrap. You're never going to get your hands into and get it out of. So be cognizant of that it has to be something we really measure and we see results and we can quantify, because I know the ask is going to be there.
I guess also, is it when you're looking to hire, the candidates and how that works with hiring someone for a temporary 2-year position versus a social work job? Mm-hmm. What's the difference in that look like? And is there a big willingness for someone to say, I'm just taking a temporary position?
Maybe.
Can I defer to Maria, the head of HR on that one?
It all sort of depends. I would say sometimes with interim positions, maybe somebody a little more junior in their career who's really just eager and, wants the experience. again, also sometimes somebody more junior in their career, but folks who have made sort of a mid-career switch, needing to just, really get some experience in. I would think with the interim, most likely we would probably be finding somebody sort of in those categories, again, who are a little more junior and just really eager and want to, build that experience, versus a longer duration. Right, you're probably going to have a bit of a broader candidate pool.
Okay, so it's not a deterrent to advertise for someone for
I think it would weed out some candidates for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I do feel strongly about having this conversation as a baseline service. And again, I'm not gonna be stubborn and call a vote on operating budget for this one. But I think if we are open-minded at this point to setting up the right metrics, setting up the right accountability, and having the commitment from this board to continue to have that conversation, I would hope that would improve the comfort of candidates, that you could look them in the eye and say, look, they're not viewing this as temporary and gone for sure. It's temporary to address a need, but there is a comprehension that there's probably a baseline need for our community. That, again, and I'm not just saying, well, Avon does it, we should do it, but clearly we were missing the boat on funding a baseline service, and we have the pandemic on top of it. So to try to give a candidate more comfort that we're not just going to back out of this blindly, we are going to endeavor to put this into a longer term funding from an operating standpoint, provided it's moving the needle for our community.
And
is that fair, guys? I mean, is that?
Yeah, can I just say one? Go ahead. You go ahead. Well, this is about just the funding model. I think I'm hearing is we could fund with ARPA for 2 years. So the 24-25 budget is when it would come back, and that we have to allocate the money by the end. I keep harping on this, Amy. Mm-hmm. We have to allocate, and the money has to be allocated by the end of 24. Right? So if
the way that the levy is set up, the ARPA is already coming into the general fund and being used for revenue loss, and the restrictions are gone.
Oh, so I keep forgetting that too. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. That's like,
is it just for clarity?
Then why are we even doing any
super
ARPA?
Basic question, but
good question.
When you keep bringing that up, does it physically mean? I mean, allocated is one thing. Allocated, we're going to delineate towards it, but use actually paying someone a paycheck, which is what ultimately is the outflow of the income of the money from the fund. Is that what you mean, or is it just what happens if we don't find a candidate? We go through the chief's problem. It takes us a year and a half or whichever. So how does that get affected?
I mean, it's an accounting thing, right?
Yeah, so I've already spent the ARPA money as far as ARPA is concerned. It's already in our operating budget. I'm probably going to apply all of public safety expenditures to it. Like, ARPA's done. All of that money that's the equivalent is ours now.
Okay.
There's no restrictions, no timing, no purpose, nothing.
So all we're doing is talking about accounting for it.
Okay.
And essentially these revenues are paying for it through a 3 transfer process, but we're not taxing the taxpayers directly for this social worker.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make, because I could see us getting into that scenario where we have the best of intentions, but because of talent, we can't, we lose. So, thank you.
That's why she's recommending it.
I know.
And then when we take the other 3.7 in, we would endeavor to do the same thing in next year's budget, presuming we take another $3.7 million tranche. Mm-hmm. And then again, we'll have some data. And again, I think this is one that's going to stay on our agenda, right? And again, the only reason I'm even asking for the accountability tied to the job description changes and the management pieces, I'm just big on overall accountability. It has nothing to do with you. I do this at work. This is just how I do things, is what is the structure? What's the program? What are those measures of success? And again, I'm not going to hold you to it's got to be 26 people, but what is the reasonable framework for it's going to be 50 cases a year? We endeavor to have 27 to 35 programs. Again, how are you going to measure this person as an employee? Right, is essentially what at least I'm looking for in terms of, you're going to add this additional service, we're investing in it, it's a partnership with this person, and then the community wants to continue to invest in this service, and how do we prove that this is a worthwhile investment?
And I agree with Sean. I mean, it's just accountability and transparency and really understanding the need in the community for it as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that I would absolutely have metrics for you and collect statistics, and would appreciate input if there was something that you felt strongly that you wanted measured. You know, and I like to think, like, I love my job. I love this community. I love being here. And, you know, I make sure that I work hard every day. And I think that if someone coming in knows that, you know, there's a chance that in 2 years, if I don't prove myself, I won't be here. I think that person, I would hope, is going to work really hard to prove to you that what they did mattered.
You just said it far more eloquently than I could have. Yes.
So I'm still confused as to what we're like agreeing to here. I mean,
We're going to fund the position through ARPA.
I understand that, but are we funding the salary increase, the all
Through
that?
ARPA, yeah.
So we are, but why are we doing that if we don't know the long-term impact
I
of
think
it and
you're
we're only hiring one?
I think you're talking about the potential raise.
Yes. Yes.
So again, we have to do a job description change. We have to.
Well, I'm just saying though, that was based on a 2-staff increase for 4 years.
So that was a placeholder. You know, we have not done a full-blown comprehensive analysis. I did a very cursory analysis with a staff member in my office. But right, if this were approved, just like with all new positions and upgrades, we do an extensive analysis. You know, we bring that to personnel subcommittee. I mean, there's more work. So we wanted to be responsible though and just say, okay, there could be other costs associated with it. So be transparent about whether it's supervision costs, you know, a piece of furniture we need to buy. We were trying to be very comprehensive and be very upfront about if we add this particular position, this is what we think it would really need. So again, if this ultimately were approved at referendum, that, you know, analysis is something that we would do. And for the youth and family social worker as well, we would also have to bring to you a job description. I mean, there's a lot of administrative work that follows this, but again, we were trying to just proactively, you know, give some estimates and placeholders for salaries and things of that nature.
So with this, should we put that ARPA spreadsheet on that we had up on Saturday to look at where we've reached the 3.7 and what that all looks like?
Yeah, I think so.
Am I done with the microphone for now?
You're off the hook. You did a good job.
Yeah, and I think that the spreadsheet is sort of our last big policy question for you all. So I don't know how folks are feeling. Do you want to try to work through the spreadsheet or regroup on
What's Wednesday night? What do we?
It's just a regroup.
If we finish tonight, we don't have to have Wednesday.
Yeah, but how long are we going to be here?
I've been here till midnight on these nights sometimes, so we can go as long as you want.
We could pull up the spreadsheet and start and see how it goes.
Could we take a short break?
Yeah.
Sean, you
Yeah.
gonna cut that table talk pie up?
All right. What are we waiting for now?
You.
No, you said, are we ready?
Yes, and just to recap, Orlando, Tom Dvorsky, and Tom Roy are still hanging out with us online.
All right, so let's go. I thought you told me you had to wait for somebody. Okay.
We're all set.
Okay, we're starting. Okay. Okay. So we're now in the ARPA portion of the program? Is that where we are?
Yep, so I think, again, this is really sort of that last, I think, big policy decision you need to make this evening. Again, these were, recommended uses with some of the ARPA funding for the fiscal 22-23 budget. Again, many, many, many thanks to Amber for putting this spreadsheet together. I think she did a really nice job of pulling all the information together and reflecting some changes based on your conversations on Thursday and Saturday. So again, I don't know if you want to go line by line or if at this point, generally for fiscal 22-23, you feel comfortable with everything that's listed there.
Well, let's get a look at it.
So we've got the.
Well, you want to go let's go down the list. How about if we do that?
Sure. So the first line were the climate control and HVAC projects at Simsbury High School. So that is sort of the big project that we recommended funding for our Board of Ed building with the ARPA dollars regards to HVAC work.
That's the third floor. That's the worst spot in the high school. So we got to do that one way or another. So.
And funding the 2 social workers at the schools for a 2-year timeline with that first tranche of money. The third row is a social worker for the town, but just one, and specializing with our youth and families.
Question. So how's that only 225?
Because it was one
person for 2 years.
Right. So it's 111,000 plus you got a desk plus you got.
We're not including that right now.
We're not buying them a desk.
That would be helpful because we don't really have nice quality furniture hanging around.
I mean, there's basic stuff. I mean, again, in the backup that I
But we didn't get one for the IT specialist.
We think we have a space for that person that's currently not being used.
So I actually read the backup sheet finally, and the backup sheet, because I didn't have it originally, said that there's training, there was IT costs, there was 20, cut it in half, there's 10. I assume we still need the 10 for that person.
That would be helpful. One, again, and this is a little different than the Board of Finance policy. I was going to say we could say yes, or, anticipating a start date probably would not be July 1. So we could go either way.
So put 250 on there, right? Because
I mean, yeah, we could bump it up. It's an estimate.
235.
235.
I just want to make sure, because I don't want to come back and nickel and dime
Thank you. I appreciate
appropriations
that.
and, So that includes, that's the social worker and that's the desks. And then we'll look at the other stuff, the job descriptions, supervisory stuff later.
Great. We've got the pickleball court at Terriffill, so that would replace the tennis court. That was part of our capital plan. The Simsbury Farms playground, the inflation impact, the dredging of Town Forest Pond, which again was part of the Open Space Master Plan and also recommended by the Open Space Committee. 2 small HVAC projects for our air volume controls at Town Hall and the library.
Yep.
And then, let's see, and then those were the items recommended for 22-23. So those would really be the only items we had recommended incorporating into the 22-23 budget. If you wanted to sort of look more comprehensively at out years, those are the 23-24 items that are flagged that we had incorporated. And then I believe for discussion this evening, right now we have recommended funding the Flower Bridge design work with cash for 22-23 because construction would be for 23-24. So I think that was something, Wendy, right, that you wanted to bring up to see if people wanted to, instead of paying general fund cash for the Flower Bridge design work, if folks wanted to pay for that with ARPA. If that's the case, again, we would need that funding for 22-23.
Yeah, so I thought
What does
it.
that add up to?
Well, if you scroll down, there's a total, but further down.
It's hard to make it so you can see it.
Yeah.
So I had a few.
But that's everything on that list,
Sorry.
not just
I
22,
have a few comments. So I have a couple comments, but now I can't see it anymore.
see
But
it.
I have my other list. I don't have that one. So the Flower Bridge design I wanted to ask about, because I thought that was budgeted for this budget year.
Yes.
But how come that says 23-24?
Yep, we just need to make an adjustment.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Can we
Okay.
just total the greens?
And the other thing, so everything in green is for 22-23 now?
Well, originally when I did this spreadsheet, everything in green tied out to what was in the CNR or the CIP. And then what I said I added per you on Sunday, that is things that we pulled off the CIP and the CNR and moved into ARPA.
For the current year. So the
that
reason
would be for this year's
I was
budget.
going to explain. Thank you. Thanks. I was explaining the Terriffill stuff seemed like if you're going to be doing the pickleball court, it would be a nice time to do the pavilion and the softball, because we're doing the softball WETOG. So do all of the Terriffill hits at the same time. That was my logic there.
Love it.
And then the other thing I still brought up before, we have a bonding request I'm going to send to see if there's any other add-ons that we can come up with for Terriffill to maybe get some extra funding from the state to do any.
If they open up the steep grants.
The other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask, can we add the 250 for the nonprofit program into the green?
Well, that's kind of, all the things down below are things that we can keep putting into, you know what I mean, to build up to the first tranche that we have.
So I agree. It's just, to me, if we, and maybe we don't agree tonight, but I would love to show the taxpayers that we're going to put 250 towards nonprofits and have them vote on it.
I agree. I mean, and like the Farmington Valley Health District contribution probably needs to go up into the green.
You mean an outside agency?
Yeah. Well,
can you speak to the facade program for the businesses a little more? Is that a revolving program? So it's a loan program? Is that how that would work?
Yeah, it is. And again, maybe it might also help. I will come right back to that question. And in terms of budget adoption, I think, probably tonight it would be good for those things that, again, generally you're feeling comfortable with. So for example, like the capital projects, if you're supportive of the capital plan and that funding, versus some things I think are probably a much longer policy conversation, maybe some of the concepts that we have embedded, through the subcommittee at this point, that those are some of the items that haven't officially come to us yet, that these are really placeholders that we can handle through supplemental appropriations. But the facade improvement program was something I had asked the state Main Street Association to provide a little bit of information on. And we had some conversations with our local Main Street group to see if they might be able to provide administration of that service. That was an idea I had, in that, a lot of our businesses, took a hit during the pandemic, and improving their facade could be something, right? It's a good investment that they might just not really have the cash on hand for right now. And okay, if we had an ongoing revolving loan program that was either no interest or low interest, when those loans get repaid to us, then that money goes back out into the community. So while it might help folks in the short term who were, again, adversely impacted by the pandemic, but would like to make that investment in their business and may not be able to otherwise, when they're in a better place and they repay that loan, we're then able to, in perpetuity, continue to reloan that money out to the community. So I thought that was kind of a neat idea, a strategic idea, in the sense that it might help address an immediate need during recovery, but it's something that we could set up for our community that would have a long-term benefit.
So that's the presentation that Sarah Nielsen brought to us back in, do you remember when it was, right?
Right, and my thought was, again,
August,
just in terms of capacity, that perhaps, we could contract with her organization to administer the
Because isn't that how she presented it?
It
That
is,
They would contract it. Okay, so I didn't know if it was something different, but that's the one that she presented. Right?
And if I'm correct, so just the facade program, that has been talked about even pre-pandemic, the concept of pulling a program like that together, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, because we used to have the infrastructure fund that we used to do things like that out of. So the old Apollo's maple tree was funded through the infrastructure fund when they redid that facade.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a program that's been successful in this town. And when we built the PAC, I believe that was the only public contribution that went to build the PAC. This was before my time. But that was where the money came from outside of the state grants to fund the PAC, and that fund has not been replenished since.
If I'm understanding correctly, I just think it's a little bit of a no-brainer, because the money keeps recycling through. Right?
That would be the intent.
I mean, you've got, the person has to be in a position to pay it back.
Right. Yeah. But again, like in terms of, I think, us perhaps wrapping up our work tonight, if we could focus on the fiscal 22-23 items, again, just to make sure that your comfort with ARPA serving essentially as the source of revenue for those capital projects.
So that would be just taking out 3 of those, right, 10 through 12, because 13 would become 22-23, is that correct?
I think they're just misstated.
Line, I'm sorry, I'm looking at
There's
it.
23, 24 on there.
Right,
I think
there were-
we should change those to 22, 23.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say, and Tom Tyberski and Orlando are still on the phone, just in terms of staff capacity for administering the projects. I would check with them to see, how quickly we might be able to do that. So maybe even if they're approved this year, we may not be able to get to all of those things. If we're doing the pickleball court and the pavilion and the backstop and the playground equipment, which is scheduled to be replaced at the park, right? That's just a lot. So even if it were all approved for the upcoming year, I'm not, certain that we could get to all of those projects.
I think that's a question about, like, if we move, like right now, those 11, 12, and 13, the backstops and the flower bridge are sitting in the current CNR, I believe, for this year.
12
right?
is the only one that's
Oh, I'm sorry. We had proposed at the staff.
I think one of the backstops was in the out year, but one was in this year. But the big thing is the 280 for the flower bridge.
Yeah.
That we had pulled into this year's CNR. So if we use ARPA funds for that, then essentially what we're spending on CNR drops, right? That will have an impact on our current budget, right?
That was in this year.
It would essentially add 250,000 back to
To
that
that.
number about how to then spend it.
Right. So then we went from 257 up to 280 by pulling this over into here.
Yeah. And that
Love
was
it.
in this year, though. The cash then was 22, 23 anyway, so we're just not spending cash, we're spending ARPA.
Right.
Right, that's good. And I think the one thing I feel, regardless of the magic that Amy does, it does send the message that we're spending the money for the community in a lot of places on things that we mostly were gonna pay for anyway. And some of those were vocalized by many residents to us during the last, whatever.
I agree. You guys gonna put your dog back in here or not?
Yeah, so we haven't talked about the dog. Well, the other thing that so let's just say we all like what's up in the top
Silence is consensus.
13 to 2, right? We all
Make
like-
sure it doesn't like you.
Okay, I like
I
that.
want to just
That
real
dog's
quick
gonna
for,
growl.
for Melissa,
Yeah.
for Melissa and Amy.
The dog's gonna love me. I bet you the dog's name is Sean. I bet you it's an Irish setter.
And
We're gonna give it your like shirt just constantly like what it responds negatively.
We're gonna bond.
I'm sorry, I should have brought my glasses.
What's your address on Longview, Chris? Make sure we fertilize your lawn properly. Eric doesn't cut his grass, so we won't mess that up. That's right. Pollinator
So whoever's
pathway.
in the in the dog house, like you could get the poop bags. With
We've got
picture on it.
It's only $30 million we're about to spend. No big deal.
I think this would really be the only two substantive changes, right?
This is half of what we spent 2 years ago when we did Latimer.
That was 1 year ago. That was last year.
Did we do that last year?
Yeah.
No.
Or Meadowwood.
We did Meadowwood.
We did them
Oh, you're
together.
right. You're right. We did.
It was
I can't-
together.
Right.
It was a
That's the most
bounty.
money. That's the most money the Board of Selectmen's ever approved at one time.
And
that I've
I
been
told
on.
you they're coming. They're not enough.
I know. I'm hoping that our new town engineer can manage that.
He said he could.
Yep.
I like to add in per Wendy M. I'm not the
$2 million
boss,
to
but
go
thank
creep on
you.
Latimer.
Well, I just that was your request.
Task Force Avenue.
If anybody can argue.
They're gonna figure
It's
it
gonna
out.
be my bird picture.
I'm not asking
for
for
now.
a supplemental appropriation.
Isn't that a good one?
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then there's
You'll be revisiting the uniforms again.
I listened to
yeah.
Last week they did the
Today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, this afternoon.
Yeah.
How about like how cool is that to get the whole reflection?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
My
why
husband is
cut
doing
down
a lot of
principals and
photography.
principals education.
Okay, you got it squared?
Yes. We're just getting ready to pull up the other spreadsheet again for you guys.
They live over in Strattonbrook.
It's beautiful.
Mhm.
Anything that's pretty
Yeah,
costs more
it's
money.
cool.
There's a reason they're square and ugly.
In that curve there, Curtis Park.
Why isn't this highlighting, letting me highlight?
What are we doing?
We're just getting the spreadsheets ready to show you
Whoa.
essentially what you've
Right.
tentatively
The damage we've done?
agreed on. Yes.
Is it cold now?
No.
Yeah.
Not very good.
The pandemic
It's gonna
coffee.
become like, insulated.
Good hobby.
We do a,
Oh, in Terrafil Park, we were showing
2-3 times a year, we do a bird walk. And I was like,
and we're moving that up. So
Yeah, the pavilion was not in this year.
Yeah.
people started doing
Right,
bird
right, right. Mhm.
Yeah, the pavilion and the Terrafil backstop were year 2
Yeah,
of CNR.
I knew that.
And,
It makes sense to do them together, though.
Yeah, great.
Why not? My birthday.
he's a lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're Audubon certified.
Why am I coming up short here?
She's like, I gotta go.
2770.
Oh my God.
It's amazing.
And the amount of things that I was missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, look over there.
Yeah.
That's what.
Oh, yeah, 30. So we're almost at
Knows all this, and he also knows
3,500.
And so it's really amazing. We even are knowing like the migration.
Losing your touch, Meriwether.
So we have like a bluebird house, and today for the first time they were going.
So look, if we do this while we're sitting here, right? We add in health district housing, 501c3.
They don't want us to do that. Just fine.
That's fine, I don't care,
Yeah, no, we don't need to.
But I'm just saying, it adds up to 3520.
Yeah, we said, yeah, that's fine.
But when are we gonna do it?
Supplemental.
We don't.
Why don't we wanna do them tonight?
Because we haven't fully presented them to the board yet.
I can't.
We don't have the health district number.
Oh, to bring
There's
it
nothing past it because we don't know what it is. It's just an estimate.
Okay, we still have to talk about the dog.
Yes, so I guess what it does is it's reasonable.
I wanted to bring up one more thing too. The bike path money. When are we gonna do the capital budget?
We did it.
We did? When?
Yeah.
We did?
Because with the bluebird house.
We were fine with
You
it.
didn't tell me.
Remember when I said, does anybody object to anything in here?
No.
That was the capital budget. Yeah, we were talking about the capital budget.
They come every year.
The CNR and all the capital is all approved?
No, we got to approve it tonight.
I don't remember talking about it at all.
Because there was nothing to talk about. We're fine with it all.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, the only item that's in there is the golf course irrigation from
Oh,
a substance
right.
standpoint, and then everything else is just they're standard numbers that we do.
Well, what if we wanted to add something to it? Like, what if I proposed putting money aside for the bike path through Terriffill for $300,000, a design study?
Oh, yeah,
Should
for
we-
Tom to get that underway.
Yeah.
I mean, you just
Can we
you just
do it with
freed up,
ARPA?
You just freed up 280 that you can use for that. By
Just
moving the
freed up
bridge over.
One of those.
But we could also use ARPA. I mean,
Ecosystem.
right?
Sure.
I just want to show that somewhere, right? Don't you? Like,
Yes, I agree. I would like to see that.
We can do that in this tranche, or we can do it in the second tranche. We can do whatever.
I don't
we
care
want.
which tranche. I hate that
Because
word.
if it gets done, then
We just want to.
we just want to design them.
We want to.
started.
We need to show that it's happening. That's all I want to do.
I mean, we got to be careful though, because we don't have the $16 million lined up to actually pay for it.
But
And
that's
there's no-
fine. But there's
no room in the capital plan
there's an
for it.
infrastructure bill that's
we do
coming.
that, that's-
If you're shovel ready, you might be able to get those grants.
I agree. I'm all for getting ready. We gotta
I
really
hear
make
you.
sure that people understand that there's no $16 million hole.
Yeah, what?
Thank group with the
Yeah, board.
We're back.
We're back.
There's a couple of ARPA changes to capital. It's just taking us a little bit to work through the spreadsheets as we're moving things around. But the backstop for the Weetog Park, we had proposed using with the traditional CNR payback method. That wasn't like excess cash capacity.
Just leave it in.
It would probably be easier, I think, to leave that.
Yeah, pick
Because
something
we have to find an exact project that matches that number to replace it with. We take it out of there.
Yeah.
Why would you treat it differently than the Terriffill backstop though?
The Terriffill backstop was in year 2, so we didn't include that in the 416,250 payback for current year. But the Weetog backstop was part of the 416,250. That's like the traditional CNR payback. method.
Can we just take it out of this and leave it where it was?
Just leave it
Yeah.
where it
It
is.
would be a
We
little
also
easier.
found a carpet cleaner for
Are you interested in a
$12,000.
carpet cleaner for
Ah!
$12,000?
No, because Wendy wants to bring something up.
Well, wait.
Well, no, you can use that. What were you suggesting? The backstop? You can
backstop.
take that out of the 416, or not take that out of the 416,250 and take the carpet cleaner out of the 416,250
There we
instead.
go. That will
We
work.
could just-
But to be clear, it's not removing it. It's not removing it from.
It's just changing the.
Right, it's just changing the
Just
funding
the
source.
economics of
Put it
where
in a
it
different
comes out.
zone,
Yeah.
boil it. Yep.
Yep, that'll work.
You could have just left it where it was, right? And just take it out of the ARPA
Thanks, guys.
worksheet.
Okay, that solves it, and then they can stay with ARPA.
Oh, but
It's with ARPA now.
all right.
Just let it.
Whatever.
Buying a carpet cleaner.
Oh, so I'm just using Amber's
Done yet?
spreadsheet. So just as a projecting, I guess we're not doing the funding items tonight. We're going to save those for supplemental appropriations is what
The yellow items?
I'm hearing. Is that true? Because the board doesn't know enough about we don't know the health district number. We don't know the housing number. We don't know the 501c, the grant program, the business recovery, and the facade program. We don't feel comfortable doing those tonight. Is that what I'm hearing?
I guess that's the question, is there anything down there that we would feel comfortable bringing up?
Pushing forward.
Well, I was going to bring, oh, go ahead.
I think for the sake of time that Maria was suggesting that we basically approve the things that are coming out of the budget.
Okay.
And things that are not wouldn't have been coming out of this year's operating budget. We go back, then we regroup
We'll
on,
do them in our
just
next.
for the sake of time.
Okay.
So, and also just in terms of, for example, like the nonprofit, I think you guys were really close to finalizing what your vision was for that. So, for example, if we were to do that through the traditional budget process, we wouldn't be able to release those funds until the new fiscal year versus
Right.
potentially
Yes.
sooner. So I think some of those items too might fit well into that category.
I keep forgetting that.
Is that true? Because don't we have to wait for the revenue loss to be recognized? So you're taking the,
We don't have to do anything anymore.
I'm gonna recognize it in fiscal year 23 by offsetting all of their public safety expenditures.
but can we expend ARPA funds now, even though that accounting hasn't happened yet?
You can expend it in 23, not 22.
So we cannot, so we can't expend any ARPA money until July 1.
You can, but you're gonna have to, it can't be part of the budget process.
So we can do we could come next week with a supplemental for $250,000 for nonprofits and open up that program right away?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
And then we can add transparency to those programs that people will see them.
That one's been transparent as hell. That one's not.
I know, but
that
I'm
one's
just.
not a secret.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring up a couple things that we threw out on Saturday. And, maybe we just target it for the next phase, but the Curtis to Terriffill bike path has been it was on one of our top goals. And if we're enhancing the park this year, it would be there's potential to get grants maybe for the trail itself with the IIJA, the infrastructure bill, but you have to be shovel ready for that. I know the Tom's working with CROG in the Bloomfield to Terriffill portion will probably be included design-wise, but the design from Curtis to Terriffill Park is yet to be determined, and there's paths there that may or may not be Simsbury town-owned, that may end up being like a maintenance item. So there's a potential there to do a design surveying of all this land that might make it even more ready to go. So that was just something we talked about and we're estimating around, I think he said around $300,000 to put. Now, I don't know capacity wise.
There he is.
Oh, hey. What is that, a swing over your head?
His workshop.
Oh.
Looks like
His woodworking.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
You're on mute, big guy. There you go.
I kicked out to the garage.
Past the family's bedtime, I get it.
So we were talking about adding the 300 of the Curtis to Terriffill Park, exploration of the path that exists, surveying, potential design. I don't know if you have capacity to have that in the 22-23 budget. I think it's a good show to the biking community that's been talking about this for many years, that we're moving forward on it, to have it in the budget and have people vote on it. So I just kind of wanted your input on that. And
No, I think that would be a great step forward in getting us making some progress.
This one's a very high priority for me, and the staff has the
Capacity to get going sooner than later, then I'd be very supportive.
And definitely, you and I know it's high priority for me as well, so.
So that would put 3,000, go ahead.
Do you want that in the ARPA list?
Yeah, it would be.
Okay.
Well, I guess this is where,
This
is
is
it
which-
I think it would be good in the, go ahead, Chris.
No, just for clarity, is this for the initial ARPA or is this for the second?
I think it should be for the initial, and it's if it's three.
I think Tom is always like very can-do, and if you all wanted to wait, one extra fiscal year and again wait for confirmation of the second tranche of ARPA money, we still have, as you know, we are in the process of wrapping up the design work, and then we'll be doing the construction from Route 10 to Curtis Park. We're also going to be under construction for the 1 mile from Bloomfield to Terriffill. We also have in the upcoming season the construction of the new sidewalk along the northern end of town from Antonio's up to the DOT commuter lot, and we also are just getting the grant award for Firetown Road. So those are, like, I would say 4 very sizable active projects we have, and it's a lot to get to. So again, whether we timed, that 300,000 this year or next year, I also am just trying to be cognizant of, capacity and not putting too much pressure on the team.
But with a supplemental appropriation, we can do it essentially whenever, right?
That's true too. If we did have capacity and came back to you and said, hey, we've got a little bit of extra time, like we could get started on it this fiscal year, we could always
The
tackle
only
it.
reason I wouldn't move forward is if I wasn't sure that there might be a higher priority, whereas this is a very high priority, I think, for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't think that, I don't think that, say, putting it in, designated either in one, either 1 year or 2 years, or how we go about it, just to be clear, doesn't diminish how important we think it is, though. I mean, so.
But I guess it does. I wouldn't want to see us miss out on any opportunities with the infrastructure bill or something, because we don't have anything in place, and so I don't know what that timeline looks like. I don't know. Do you know, Wendy?
It's end of 2022, I think. It's still somewhere out there, but they said 2022. At the end of 2022, we might start seeing the money, or next year.
Like have opportunities for that grant funding if we have.
Yeah, I know the state is staffing up their DOT, like with 200 people to handle all the infrastructure stuff. I don't know if it's going to fit in this but they talk about trails and bridges. So like even maybe the bridge, I don't know if we'd qualify, but it's just an option.
So just as a side, would the Flower Bridge qualify potentially?
I don't know. It's a question. It might. They say bridges. I don't know if they mean you have to.
It is.
Yes.
People do move across it, but so
it is potential.
So just to be clear, Heather, your concern is that of the, if we can get it, is the potential to be ready to receive this under the infrastructure bill.
Yes.
It's not because you want to push it forward just to get it done sooner to realize the project sooner. It's because it's to align with the funding mechanism potential. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's some potential opportunity for funding if you have a design. Right now, if you just have a dream, that.
Okay.
Well, it
doesn't allow
sounds
you
like
to
the logjam
apply.
is maybe more in having the staff capacity to do the design work. I mean, we can say the money.
That's what I was responding to. Which you just rattled, and I'm not here to judge. I was like, what you just rattled off was a pretty, substantial number of projects.
Right, and that's just our sidewalk and trail projects. That's not, all the other facilities project that Tom and his new deputy.
I'm trying to be realistic because I'm trying
to be a little realistic as well.
If we give the bike community any indication.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is if by moving these dollars up or making this designation, are we then essentially saying staff needs to make this a bigger priority to the expense of other projects that they're doing right now? Because I don't know how that's the logjam, I think.
Yeah, and if you're okay with that, I think if you can also just support us with that at the Board of Finance, because sometimes, right, there have been criticisms in the past of like, oh, well, we're not spending and getting to the projects fast enough, and they're sitting with open dollars. So
these are ARPA dollars.
They shouldn't care, right?
They have no say.
The only question I have here, one more question, is if we put in the 300 for Curtis, we might have to drop it to 225 if we want to include the 75 for the dog, because we don't have the dog in here. I'm just saying.
One thing is getting back, if I could real quick, on the trail. If money was available, we could start or be able to start things like the survey early.
Right. We're throwing around and doing a supplemental when you said, but then we're still behind the 8 ball by a couple of months. if there's a grant that comes down the pipeline. So I appreciate and I agree with your warning, but you also know how to run these, and you're not going to run your team into the ground, right, Tom? You know how to manage your staff. So I think you hear what the prioritization here is if whatever we can get ready to put us in a position to get money, and you've been phenomenal at doing that in the past, right? So if we remove the constraint and then let you manage it how you see fit, but again, nobody's going to get their hands slapped at the end of the year if you simply can't get it done.
Yeah, I think that's
So, and can we even rephrase it? Really, you're saying you're going to survey the existing, right? Whatever's there now is really to see if it's real and usable, because that's going to lead into what future design is going to end up being, right? Like after seeing that path, there's so many options unless you know what's ours and what's usable, right?
The survey is going to do a couple things. It's going to define ownership and boundaries. And then it's also going to give us detailed information on grade and slope. So we would know where we could fit it in terms of what would be too steep.
So let's call it right, the Curtis to T-ville Trail Survey. I mean, and then it makes it sound a little less, but that it's right. Well, whatever. I don't care what we call it, but that's really what we're doing there.
It's 225.
I'm trying to get the dog.
I hear consensus that we should.
Yeah, but
You should do it. You should add it. Put it in for the full 300. And I would.
Well,
recommend,
I want to get the dog too.
I would recommend that you ask the Board of Finance to pay for the dog out of the private duty fund.
Oh, do we have a? Oh,
Well, they
We used to, and then they swept
moved
it.
that money into the capital reserve, but there are funds in the capital reserve.
okay, okay. Like ARPA's a nice show again, but that's fine.
I mean, you could do ARPA, or you could do. I mean, again, there's two pots of money to get it from.
Well, do we need the capital reserve by any chance for next year because of you can use it for debt service, or did I make that up? Like to lower
That's one of the
debt
purposes
service,
that
so
we
if we
use,
don't
but-
use it, we'll have more there to offset next year's increase.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can use it for debt service, anticipated emergencies, cash capacity for projects. I mean, there are a variety of uses we can use that for.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say, I'm looking at the Amber spreadsheet, and I moved everything over. If I put in 225 for Curtis T-ville Survey Trail and the dog for 75, which is really a car, right? It's a car.
But the 225 won't really fund
Okay.
the entirety of the work. I think Tom's estimate
I know
was
he said 3, but I was
Yeah.
trying to lowball him just to get the dog in there. Okay.
Then it can't get done.
Well, we could, I mean, we're just,
Estimate.
it comes out to 3,895, which is pretty much half. Oh, well, maybe I'm wrong. Oh,
I mean, it's not $8 million. It's only 3 point.
I added in the, I'm adding in the funding for Farmington Valley Housing grant and the grant programs.
You want a dog or do you want nonprofit funding? I mean, that's.
I want both.
Then look to
Wants it all.
Then look to the other source. And again, ultimately.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it to the professionals how to do it, but
As I say, again, I mean, it's sort of a policy decision in
Yeah,
terms
we
of.
have to make the right.
yeah,
Capital
so I
reserve
still,
or ARPA for
we were already voted to put the $10,000 in the operating for the dog, right? So that's there. If we put in the 300, if that's really what Tom really needs, and then the 70 for the dog, right? 70. Tom can get you a good deal on he said on Fords.
You're the same rate.
Okay, right, right. So what do you
It's
have?
not the Ford, it's the cage.
I don't have a different amount, I guess. So what do you guys come up with, like?
What are you trying to get to?
Well, you had to take the backstop out, right? Didn't that have to go out of the?
No, they
No.
put a carpet cleaner in.
That's right.
So in all my green, I have, and I'm not hiding columns, rows this time, I have 3140.
What do you have in there that they don't?
I don't know.
You have the dog.
I did, I added in 70.
And yeah, so they don't have that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and they don't have the 300 for.
They don't have the 300 in
Okay,
there.
so I added those, and then if I add what Amber has at the bottom for those funds, which are could change, that adds 750, so it's totaled about 30,
3890, which is close.
It's heavy.
And then if we get the second half, we'll be doing this again next year.
Or in a supplement. I mean,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
we don't have to wait till.
That's true. But it might be nice to do it with the budget, because then we'll know what our priorities are next year, too.
Well, but I guess it depends on if you
The
want
need.
people to wait a year.
For the next tranche. Not for this stuff.
So we're doing everything in yellow also?
I think we're doing these as like supplemental appropriations.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But the two things I just put up here, those are gonna be included in the budget, so.
That's what Wendy's suggesting.
Well, I'm not gonna be the only one that I think everybody
We're
should.
just talking it through. Don't
Okay.
worry. Nobody's getting held accountable on their own.
Oh, I'm not afraid, but I
I
want to
know,
make sure people are agree.
So, Amy, remind me, how much money do we have in the ARPA account?
$3,757,833.
Beautiful. So, Melissa, can you just scroll down, please? So the important stuff is what? The nonprofit?
FEHD.
The housing.
FHD.
For the health district.
Housing authority.
So that's 200, 250, and then 100K for nonprofits. So is that 350 plus 3.165? So we're still under the 3.6.
Oh, I had 200, so that was
Right.
good.
So you guys can do everything, we can do everything in green and make sure that if we get no other money, we can still do the nonprofits, we can still do the housing authority, we can still do the health district with ARPA money. And we're probably gonna get the other 3.6, so it's a short term, just to make sure we get it.
Good summary.
So I'm fine supporting everything that's in green, Wendy.
Okay. And then the yellows are the yellow, those are going to be the appropriations later. right?
Assuming, yeah, so, and again, just, I think, and please correct me if I'm speaking out of turn for us, but the health district is our top priority, the nonprofits are a secondary top priority, and then the housing authority, and those added to the 3.165 still come in under the amount of money we have from ARPA today. So we can still do our top priorities in yellow if the feds pull up the other 3.6 from us. If they don't, everything in yellow plus happens, so we're in good shape.
Well, we haven't even talked about like the DEI and those things.
We don't have
either.
to worry about those.
Yeah, I'm not worrying about them. I'm just saying.
I'm good with what's in green right now.
Okay. You good?
I'm good with what's in green.
Me too.
So I move that we add the items in green up on the screen to be funded from ARPA as Amy has laid out from an accounting standpoint.
A second?
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, that passes.
Voted for the dog.
You did. He's a softie.
Not for a dog.
What did you say?
She did too.
Get sucked in.
Seemed like it came in a package.
You can't vote against the whole package just because of the service stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a reasonable human being.
What do I have here?
I'm getting punchier as the minutes go on.
I am punchy.
It's getting late.
You want her to keep going.
We're practically there, guys.
Trying to save you for your birthday.
When you told me we already voted on the capital budget.
We didn't, but we didn't object to
I
it.
mean, you.
Oh, I got that. No, I'm.
No. Danger.
BOE.
Near term or was it?
What questions do you have on the capital budget?
This
I don't think I have any, do I?
No. I mean,
The only questions I have is the whole cash for capital,
Right.
like spending cash, but if we all agree that that's the best way to go, then I don't care anymore.
I mean, I think it is just
Well,
sort
I
of
think we
balancing.
should do that instead of having a lower mill rate. I mean, I would.
Yeah,
I would
no, I'm
wanna
not-
use
yeah,
the-
yeah.
I would want to use the cash to.
Yeah.
I think we're all. I think
we all agree with that policy.
Yeah.
Makes
Yeah.
sense
Yeah.
moving into next year.
Because I
Yeah, I think that's the right
We have the
recommendation.
reserves as well to help with that.
And they're building the budget. They're building the motions for that, I believe.
And then next, yeah.
You guys need 5?
I can show the levy count, but then we need 5 for the motions.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see the levy calc, because that is kind of critical.
It's going to
I
be
mean,
flat.
it's flat, so
be happy, maybe.
They're never happy with us. Yeah,
I'll soften that one.
they should
We can
be.
work on that.
The budget.
We
You
cut a
think they'll
couple.
be unhappy with this?
No, I don't think so. I was told that the charges were flat if we come in over.
If I were
They want eyes on?
I was
They want
thinking the
eyes on.
whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Kristen's had a long day.
Meeting we had.
Yeah, I'm sure.
At least it's good.
Yeah,
She likes
she's
that.
fine.
She's good.
I said you've had a long day. I
Thing is,
can't believe you're
we were
toughing it
told
out.
We cannot go over. We cannot go.
Nobody's gonna. Nobody's gonna.
If we are, then we're
pull the
cutting.
rug on you on anything right now. You know, you're released.
I'm clear to close.
Say that again?
What's that?
Spot check me.
Yes.
So we added the CALIA
Yep.
specialist, we added 2 officers.
Yep.
IT specialist.
Yep.
Network engineering support, construction inspection services, Pollinator. Simsbury Farms community events, executive coaching, the service dog operating expenditures only. We're taking the ARPA money in and out. We're
Just
going.
question though, did you add the bennies for the officers and the IT specialists?
Yeah, they're all
Okay.
included in that
Hold
number.
there.
Just, again, just
It's in
asking.
there.
It's
we're gonna keep
140K
the
for
flat
that.
bill
Yeah.
rate funding is
officer.
564. We reduced the legal by 25,000, and then we added a social worker to be funded by ARPA. And then that gets us to our flat mill rate.
That's cutting it close, but it's flat.
That's how it works. Yep.
Okay.
Everything's captured, we'll work on the motions.
Okay.
Right.
And how much cash will go for capital?
560.
Five.
Is it 560? No.
No.
No, it
It's
was
256.
256, yeah. Right?
Oh, 750.
But then we had the
But we
cash from the
pulled-
Flower Bridge design.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
that
right, you're
got-
right,
got
you're right, you're right. So that went back up to the 500,
That's
yeah.
cash back by
You're right, you're right.
using, yeah, using the
Good.
ARPA
That was a good
dollars.
move.
All right.
I think that's going to be important that we illuminate that when we get into the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
That-
Set it on fire. It's so bright.
Well,
Mark your
because there was
calendar.
something
Do an interpretive
presented- There was
dance.
something presented on Saturday very sort of, I think, competently, and then we're changing those numbers somewhat, so we just need to also, that concept that Amy walked through on Saturday had a lot of momentum and energy around the positivity of it, and we had some Board of Finance members here. Those numbers are changing somewhat, but we can also say that we're putting money back in too through
Yep.
another.
And we're really investing in existing assets to help the community and to help the health of the town.
Yeah.
And it's an easy message to send.
Peter Van Loon from the Economic Development Committee. What the? Move effective March 14th, 2022 to appoint, oh, that's the wrong one. Move to accept the resignation of Peter Van Loon, D, as a member of the Economic Development Commission effective March 14th, 2022.
So moved.
I read through them earlier, so.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Oh, proposed appointment of Carrie Meckel to the Economic Development Commission. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to appoint Carrie Meckel, D, to the Economic Development Commission with a term expiring October 10th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I sound so excited. Hold on. Proposed appointment to the Business Development Committee. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to appoint Tom Earl as a regular member of the Business Development Committee with a term ending August 13th, 2022.
Move that.
Okay.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, appointment of David Bloom to Library Board of Trustees. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to appoint David Bloom as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees with a term ending December 1st, 2025 to fill a vacancy created by the resignation of Heather Getz on December 6th, 2021.
So,
Okay,
second.
Heather, got that one? Anybody second?
I'm not calling the motion, sorry.
For old time's sake. Did someone second it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Must have been right.
Really? That was funny. Resignation of Richard Cortez from the Public Building Committee, Building Code Board of Appeals, and Planning Commission. Move retroactive to February 28th to accept the resignation of Richard Cortez as a regular member of the Public Building Committee. His term was set to expire January 1st, 2026. Move retroactive to February 28th to accept the resignation of Richard Cortez as an alternate to the Building Code Board of Appeals. It was due to expire January 1st, 2024. Move retroactive to February 28th to accept the resignation of Richard Cortez as an alternate member of the Planning Commission due to expire December 4th, 2023.
So moved with our thanks.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do you need a
Yeah,
second?
Chris second.
Oh, a second. Okay, Chris second. Sorry. All those in favor? Aye. Any changes to the minutes?
They're beautiful.
Beautiful. We had some interesting communications, so we're still waiting for those guys. We had the whole thing on the opt-out, the ADU opt-out, which we should really read. And do we have a date, Maria, when they're coming to present that officially?
Yeah, we should probably work that out in an upcoming agenda process.
Okay, let's do that next.
Our meeting schedule, but then also we'll have the new director coming on board soon as well.
Oh, yeah.
So just kind of the timing of that.
Okay.
But this spring.
Wendy, I'm sorry, who are you referring to? They.
So it's the zoning commission. Maria put it in here because they haven't been able to get to us, right? Was that part of it?
They just submitted their letter to us essentially, where you'll now be reviewing the ADUs. So we'll just need to set up a time for you all to get that informational presentation and sort of start making your decisions around that. But again, we'll just need to discuss timing with your sort of your workload and again with the new director coming on board.
Yeah, and then we'll have to have a public hearing to hear from people about and talk, keep in touch with zoning to see what they're planning to do as far as changes. Okay, is that all that was in there? I think that's it.
Agenda? That's the end of the agenda.
Okay, so I can't adjourn though.
To finish up our motions
Okay.
and.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom.
While you're all waiting there, I'm just gonna say goodnight. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, Orlando, go to bed if you haven't.
Get my phone. So everything else is formality to just make all the motions.
There were a lot of capital changes, so there's just a lot to kind of move around. But
okay,
they're working their magic.
Okay,
they're like magicians.
You're not pulling any fast ones on us, are you?
Yeah.
You are.
Oh yeah, it's all totally sketchy.
Okay, so I just start reading? I know Sean's disappointed, but I'm reading it, Sean.
No, I have a question on the math.
Uh-oh.
At the bottom, 335 to be funded by the American Rescue Act funds.
For Sienna.
Where's the rest of it?
Capital?
Oh, it's up top.
Where are you looking?
At the bottom of the first page.
That's just what's in CNR. Those are just the CNR projects.
So where's the rest? Capital?
There's some in capital. and
Some in
some
operating.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're just gonna trust the math, right?
Just wanted to ask.
Okay. We could rotate these. Move effective, this is the 2022-23 budget resolutions for the Board of Selectmen.
First one already. Go ahead.
Oh, gosh. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the Board of Selectmen 22-23 operating budget in the amount of $25,466,760 to include the following changes from the town manager's proposed budget. $7,500 increase for Pollinator Initiative, $7,500 increase for Simsbury Farms 350th. No. 50th. Gosh, it's still there.
It's like 354 at this point.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so for the 50th Simsbury Farms anniversary, 4,225 increase for executive coaching, 117,242 increase for IT specialist position, 5,000 increase for supplemental network engineering support, 20K increase for construction inspection, 283,551 increase for 2 patrol officer positions, 110,789 increase for CALIA specialist position, 125K increase for youth and family social worker position and associated costs, $10,000 increase for service dog operating costs, $25,000 decrease for legal, labor relations, $564,574 increase for cash for capital, $3,757,833 transfer in from the American Rescue Plan Act Fund for revenue loss, $3,632,833 transfer out to cash for capital. Do I read all of them?
Yes.
Oh, and then we just do them all at once, or do we do them individually?
I would do it individually.
Yeah, okay. So I ask for a motion?
Move that.
Second? Eric, second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the Water Pollution Control 22-23 operating budget in the amount of $4,341,139, including Avon and Granby's CWF share.
Move it.
Second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the Residential Property 22-23 operating budget in the amount of $54,172.
Move that.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the Simsbury Parks and Rec Fund 22-23 operating budget in the amount of $2,218,000.35. All those in favor, oh.
Move it.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. That passes. Move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the Debt Service 22-23 operating budget in the amount of $6,371,525.
Move that.
Okay?
I'll second.
Amber, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Move effective March 14th, 22 to approve the capital and non-recurring plan for 22-23 in the amount of $2,509,775, including $416,510 to be funded by the general fund via the 5-year payback method, $763,753 to be funded by the general fund, $335,000 to be funded by the American Rescue Plan Act funds, $191,500 to be funded by the Town Aid Road Fund, $280,000 to be funded by the Sewer Use Fund, $290,512 to be funded by the Capital Reserve Fund, $15,000 to be funded by anticipated trade-in value, $59,000 from projected savings, $18,500 from donations, $140,000 from the Golf Equipment Fund.
Move that.
From the golf, okay?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, move effective March 14th to add the following new project to the capital improvement plan for 2022-23 in accordance with Charter Section 803B. Multi-use connection trails development, Curtis Park to Terriffill for $300,000. Terriffill Park court replacements for $350,000. District climate control improvements for $1,650,000.
Move that.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Move effective March 14th, 2022 to approve the capital improvement program to include the following 22-23 with total funding of $12,522,744 for 22-23. Course irrigation system replacement for $2,550,000. Recommended funding is bonds. Multi-use connections trails development Route 10 to Curtis Park, $1,582,744 with grants. Multi-use connections trails development Curtis Park to Terriffill, $300,000 ARPA funds. PAC grant match Rotary Park restrooms, $350,000 Capital Reserve Fund. Terriffill Park court replacement, $350,000 with the ARPA funds. Highway pavement management, $1.205 with bonds, grants, and cash. Sidewalk reconstruction, $200,000 with bonds. Municipal site and safety improvements at Town Hall for $450K with bonds. Old Drake Hill Road Flower Bridge repairs design, $280,000 with the American Rescue Plan Fund. Enoch entrance improvements, $360K Special Revenue Fund Trust. Enoch parking lot improvements, $245K with bonds. Primary clarifier, the $150K with Sewer Use Fund. District network infrastructure, $400,000, missing a dollar sign there, with bonds. District climate control improvements, $1.650 with bonds, American Rescue Plan Act funds. Tooten Hills water distribution and drainage systems, $480,000 with bonds. Central School electrical service distribution, $1950, $250,000 Capital Reserve Fund and cash. Central School replaced the EPDM roof V3, $370,000 with bonds and grants. Terriffill School replace the roof, EPDM V1, V2, $1 million, bonds and grants. Terriffill School replace the 1984 modulars, $350,000 in cash.
Move that.
Okay?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Move effective March 14, 22 to refer the following capital projects to the Planning Commission in accordance with CGS Section 8-24. Golf course irrigation system replacement, multi-use connections, trails development, Route 10 to Curtis Park, multi-use connections, trails development, Curtis Park to Terriffill, PAC grant match, Rotary Park restrooms, Terriffill Park court replacement, highway pavement management, sidewalk reconstruction, multiple site and safety improvements at Town Hall, Old Drake Hill Road, Flower Bridge design, repairs design, Eno entrance improvements, Eno parking lot improvements, primary clarifier, district network infrastructure, district climate control improvements, Tooten Hills water distribution and drainage systems, Central School electrical service distribution 1950, Central School replace EPDM roof V3, Terriffill School replace roof EPDM V1, V2, Terriffill School replace 1984 modules.
Move that.
Okay? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Move to adjourn.
Wait, that's my job. Oh, no. Yeah, no,
That
it's
is not your job.
No, it's not. It's not. Wait, somebody second that.
I second it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Yay, good
Nice job, everyone.
Nice job.
Well
You did it.
done.
You did it.